If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. And we've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to be joined by one of our good friends, Blake Lovell. He does such amazing work over at Southeastern 14. Certainly, we're going to be talking a lot about those SEC teams with him, but coupled with that, we're going to be taking a look at really the tenor of college basketball and what we're seeing right now. Certainly, we need to be diving in on some of these teams that have been ascending/declining over the last few weeks. Coupled with that, we're going to be taking a look at a few games that we're going to be seeing for Wednesday in the SEC. A lot of intriguing matchups, including that fun one between Tennessee and Mississippi State. So we've got a lot on tap with our good friend Blake, and we're going to be talking about that in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday, as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Junior_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that's fine, an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast. That 5-star review really did not get in any of those Twitter/X questions today, but we had a fun day of college basketball on Tuesday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Now, just a word of caution. A lot of the late games I am not going to be able to sum up on this podcast because the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN Sports Betting Network, that is from midnight to 3 Eastern Time. That is 9 to midnight Pacific. So I do have to record this more around about 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific Time. So as of right now, our DK Network right up of Georgia Tech laying the number that is hanging in the balance right now. They are up by 1 and with about 2 minutes remaining in the first half, so hopefully we can get a little bit of a turnaround there. It was looking very good to start out with, and then Notre Dame was able to make a little bit of a run, so we're going to be sweating that one out, and this is not a game that is quite done yet, but looking like Texas Tech going to be able to pull this one out against Oklahoma State. They're up 78-64 on Oklahoma State with about 3.5 minutes remaining, and it's a Texas Tech team that is really starting to ascend. I do like what I'm seeing out of them, and we did see a lot of fun Big 12 action on Tuesday, but that's up for Texas Tech as I record this. They're 7 of 13 from three-point range, being able to get Pops Isaacs going for 24 points as I record this. And for Oklahoma State, defense just does not look the same for the team this season. They're actually winning the rebound battle, but they have only forced 4 turnovers on Texas Tech. So Texas Tech looking very efficient on that front. This game did go final, and this went the way of old Iowa State as they were able to get the outright win against Houston in a game that was grimy, it was slow, and it was ugly. 57-53. Iowa State gets a win. Houston, they just couldn't get anything going. 7-26 from three-point range. And, the Houston defense was more than good enough to be able to win this game as these two teams had a combined 28 turnovers in this contest. The man that was able to lift Iowa State to victory, Taymon Lipsby. He was a great defender last year, but has really been able to elevate on offense. He did have 4 turnovers, but was able to generate for the team 14 points. And Jamal Shed, the 5 turnovers, a little bit unsightly from him. He did have 14 points, which was nice, but those turnovers turned out to be the difference in this one. Seton Hall is able to get the outright win, but they're unable to get a cover against Georgetown. 74-70 the final in this one at Georgetown. They go just 10 of 35 from 3, while Seton Hall went 7 of 15 from 3. Seton Hall actually went 11 of their first 13 from the floor, and then from there, they just started to turn the ball over too much. They lose their turnover battle 17-12. Georgetown plays even up on the glass, and Jalen Epps was able to get you to the window on Georgetown on this one as he had 30 points. This line was right around 5.5, so good on them for being able to get that cover. And Columbia was able to pull off a cover as well. They've been one of your better against the spread teams. If you were able to get them at a 12.5, as this was between 12 and 12.5, they get there for you on this 91-79 to be able to start out the day, as that was a high scoring and just overall slugfest. Another team has been able to do a really good job against the spread for you. That would be Kentucky, and this one did depend upon your closing number as well as Kentucky. They closed in a lot of spots, more around about 11.5 to a 12, so you should have gotten there, and that should be able to push you to 10-4 against the spread with Kentucky. 90-77 the final line. And this was very uncomfortable for Kentucky throughout, especially in the first half. They were able to get out to a relatively nice double-figure lead, and then Missouri was able to cut into it. But Kentucky, they're able to pull away late, despite the fact that they did cool down a little bit from three-point range, something that I did see coming. 7 of 23 from three-point range, but Trey Mitchell, 20 points, 14 rebounds for Kentucky. They dominated on the glass, 42-27. They actually do lose the turnover battle, but that said, with the way that they were able to dominate on the glass and having Ahmad Bradshaw back the fold with about 10 points, 6 boards, that was certainly able to help elevate this team as well. And then you did see Florida State as a little bit of an underdog get it done outright against a Wake Forest team that has been ascending a little bit, 87-82 final in this one. As for Florida State, they go 7 of 13 from three-point range, and they win the turnover battle by a count of 20-13 for Florida State. You had Jameer Watkins be able to chip in their 19 points, and for Wake Forest, Cameron Hildreth, he was able to chip in their 25 points, but with Florida State shooting that way from three-point range, did make it a little bit of a dicey scenario there. Texas has been a team that has been all over the place against the spread thus far this season, but they were able to rise up on Tuesday, 74-73. They go on the road, and they get the job done against Cincinnati. Texas just 5-10 against the spread, but you know what? You'll certainly take this one. As for Texas, Dylan DeSue, him back in the fold, massive for this team. 33 points, 6 rebounds. For Cincinnati, they were able to do a relatively solid job on the glass as they win that battle 34-28, but they lose the turnover battle 15-10. You had Simeus Lucasius be able to chip in their 19 points, and for Cincinnati, they go 7-17 from three-point range, but DeSue was all the difference in this one. Also a team that is 5-10 against the spread in the Big 12 is also a team that's 5-10 straight up. West Virginia, they lose at home to Kansas State 81-67. As for West Virginia, you did have Raekwon Battle give you 21 points, but the rest of the team did not show up. Without Jesse Edwards, this team is being plowed on the glass. They lose the rebound battle 35-22, and for this Kansas State team, they go 6 of 19 from three-point range, more than good enough for them. Both of these teams go 19 of 23 at the free throw line, and for Kansas State, they really hadn't broken 75 points in regulation because they played a lot of overtime in an eon, but they bust through here. For Alabama, we've been questioning the defense all season long. They rose up in this spot, though, against South Carolina. 74-47. South Carolina just couldn't hit water if they thought of a boat, and South Carolina, it's been one of your better stories in all of college basketball this year. This drops them to now 11-4 against the spread, but for Alabama, they're now 8-7 against the spread as they go 15-34 from three, while South Carolina has that doldrum of 5-25. For South Carolina, they lose the turnover battle 17-15, and Mark Sears, all the difference for Alabama. He had 31 points, and as a matter of fact, he and Aaron Estrada combined 48 points. South Carolina, as a team, they had 47, so that's a little bit of an issue. This was an issue if you took the over. VCU and George Mason just couldn't score buckets. 54-50. VCU able to get the job done as a little bit of an underdog, as VCU, they now have back in the fold their full allotment of guys, as Sean Bairstow, he was able to pop off and give the team 6 points in this one. George Bashmili off the bench, only about 2 points. So the guys that returned, they didn't have too much of an impact, but they were able to do so defensively, as George Mason 0 of 15 from three-point range. So that was a little bit less than terrific out there in the MAC. You've got a lot of over teams, and we did see quite a few overs become overwhelming in the MAC as well. As Toledo, they go on the road. They take down Kent State by a count of 89-75, as Kent State now 10-3 to the over thus far this season. Miami of Ohio, they took down Buffalo by a count of 86-65. That was a total of 144.5. That went over. Miami of Ohio now 9-4 to the over. Really, the lone team has played more than one more game to the under rather than the over is Buffalo, so they've been having a little bit of a tough time being able to put the ball in the basket, but Toledo going back to them, they're now 9-6 to the over as well. And for Miami of Ohio, Anderson Mambo being back in the fold, being able to give the team 21 points, that was pretty massive for them. Akron is now 7-6 to the over, 80-76. They went well over that total against Ball State. Eastern Michigan, they are 8-5 to the over, and they get plowed by Central Michigan 80-64. This was a game that was set with a 138.5 total, so that goes over. As for Central Michigan, they went 11 of 17 from three-point range. They had really been struggling from three-point range all season long, so we saw things get very overwhelming out there in the MAC. Currently, as I do this podcast as well, this is a game as at halftime. halftime. BYU is up on Baylor by kind of 39-33. BYU has been one of your better cover teams in all of college basketball. We shall see if they can keep this up, but Baylor just 11 of 31 from the floor in the first half. They actually won the turnover battle, but they lose the rebound battle. Meanwhile, Richmond, they are about to finish this one off. They take down Loyola of Chicago on the road. Loyola Chicago has been one of your worst cover teams in all of college basketball. Over the last 2 years, they have been pretty badly overvalued, and this is going to drop Loyola Chicago to now being 6-9. Very nice against the spread, while Richmond, they're now 10-4-1 against the spread. They go 10 of 22 from three-point range with the King, Jordan King, being able to give you 16 points in this one for Loyola Chicago. They actually win the battle on the glass, 41-33, but they lose that turnover battle as well. Richmond, top 5 team in all of college basketball, turns the fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and it's looking like it's going to be another rough one for DePaul. Currently doing this at the half of this game. Creighton up 47-30 on DePaul. No shock here. It's been relatively rough going, and this is something that I've been talking about on the podcast as well. Look at some of these teams that maybe didn't play the most stellar of competition early on during the season, as perhaps their metrics are a little bit overinflated. We need to see the second half in this one, but I'm doing this at the half. Duke up 48-23 at the half on Pittsburgh, as Blake Lovell had 9 points for Pittsburgh, but they've just had absolutely no response for the duo of Kyle Filipowski along with Jared McCain. These two guys combined for 27 points, so these two guys by themselves outscored Pittsburgh by 4 points in the first half. Filipowski also chipped in their 6 rebounds, looking like we're going to get thorough domination there. And right now, one of your most disappointing teams in all of college basketball, looks like they might disappoint as well. At the half, Auburn up 30-22 on Texas A&M as well. This is an A&M team that just has not been able to make you money this far this season. They're actually 7-7 against the spread, to my surprise. I actually thought it was far worse than that, but Auburn has certainly been able to heat up, and that's certainly a team that we're going to be talking about with Blake Lovell, and do have to mention this one as well. Nebraska up on the half against Purdue by kind of 41-30. Purdue has been a really good cover team this far this season, but you may remember last year in Big Ten play, it was a Purdue team that they just weren't really doing a great job against the spread. They entered into the night 9-4 and I believe 2 pushes against the spread, and I do think that they're going to be able to do a little bit of a better job this year in conference play rather than last year. But going back to last season, Purdue against the spread, they were just 9-12-2 against Big Ten foes. So that is very much something to be mindful of, and something that we've been seeing in college basketball this year that you do want to be mindful of. The overs have just been continuing to hit. The over rate is now up to 51.4% in college basketball. Obviously, this is with some games that are still pending for Tuesday, but 1,260 overs, 1,191 unders. Home underdogs still doing relatively okay, 296, 290, and 12 against the spread, but favorites hitting at about 50.7%. 1,235, 1,242 against the spread. Meanwhile, if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, it's been really an overpalooza, 157 overs to 147 unders. We've had along the way, I believe, like 5 or so pushes, so about 51.6% of games going over the total. And we've seen favorites come back to the pack a little bit, but still doing a relatively solid job. 153, 146, and 9 against the spread, with home underdogs over the last 7 days, 51, 49, and 2 against the spread. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Tuesday. Now let's take a look at what we're all getting on the SEC landscape. A man that does such a great job with that, Blake Lovell, who does amazing work over at Southeastern 14. He joins me next to discuss that and so much more right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Xavier Peterson, now a part of the UC Family Podcast. We're back in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eaps Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Blake Lovell. He does such tremendous work over at Southeastern 14. I know that he has been locked in on everything that we've been seeing this college basketball season and does such an amazing job, not just with his SEC coverage, but his coverage all throughout college basketball. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell. That last name is spelled Lovell. And Blake, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yep, always enjoy it, Greg. Yeah, it's like I said, conference play has started, and with that always comes some fun and somewhat wacky results for sure.
Yep, it certainly has been wacky, and we have to dive in on this. We are doing this in advance of the Tuesday game, so we are unsure if Texas A&M was able to get up off the mat or not, but in my opinion, they've been the biggest surprise in the SEC, which I think is saying something because you got South Carolina at 13-1, Ole Miss at 13-1, but A&M has been my biggest surprise, and it's been a surprise to the negative. Them losing by 15 points at home to LSU. Recognize that they've been dealing with some injuries, what have you, but what have you made out of this Texas A&M team that it just feels like this team isn't quite the same as they were a season ago, especially defensively?
Yeah, that's the problem, is that they're not, defending as well. That's kind of always felt like the thing that you could be sure of at times with Buzz Williams' teams is, that they're going to be pretty good defensively. They're going to be hard to play against just in terms of, the style they play and those kind of things. But yeah, this year it's probably average is probably the best way to put it. Maybe good, at times, but still a team that's not forcing a lot of turnovers. And I think that's something that doesn't help. You think 2 seasons ago they made the run in the NIT or whatever. They forced a lot of turnovers defensively, and that was kind of something that they could lean on. But, with this team too, when you're not doing that and you're just not able to make shots from the perimeter, I called it today. We were doing some stuff, and I'm like, this feels like Mississippi State from last year minus the defense, where we talked about how Mississippi State was the worst three-point shooting team in the country last year. A&M's not far off at this point. They're shooting 26, 27% from three, something like that. And I think when you just take that into account, when they find themselves in situations where they're just not making shots, I think they're like 15 to 79 or something in their last 5 games from three. That's a struggle. But the good news for A&M, I guess, is they're one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. So even though they missed all these shots, they're getting a lot of second chance opportunities. And, the Tyrese Radford thing where he's missed some games, just now trying to get back into the groove of things. Don't know if he's all the way back just yet. And the bigger issue, Greg, is their upcoming schedule. Like you said, we're doing this in advance of Tuesday's games. They're at Auburn. They got to play Kentucky. Then they go to Arkansas. Who knows what to make of them. Then they go back to this LSU team that just beat them by 15 at home. So not an easy start in these first 5 games for Texas A&M. They've got some work to do here.
Yeah, it's been majorly surprising what we've seen out of A&M, and the big crux of the issue for A&M on defense has been their three-point shooting defense, ranking well outside the top 200 with that regard. And having to go to Auburn, that's relatively rough. And just taking a look at that game, again, this is going to be a result that is going to be done when this podcast uploads. They've been one of my biggest surprises in the country to the positive, because for Auburn, they let that game slip away early on in the season against Baylor. Ever since then, this team has went 12-1. They've been pulverizing teams, and this looks like the most complete team that Bruce Pearl has had in quite some time, because even if you date it back 2-3 years ago, back when they did have the top 5 pick and Mr. Smith in the fold, and we all know what Jabari Smith is doing now in the NBA, it was a little bit of a top-heavy team. It just feels like this team has a lot more balance, and they really check so many different boxes.
Yeah, the thing I keep saying about Auburn is I don't really see the weaknesses. I don't know where they have one. And I think that is something that has been made very clear. I'd say their biggest weakness is probably still three-point shooting. But even then, when you look at their percentage this year compared to what it was last year, they're shooting 34% this year. I think they shot 31, 32% last year. So even that bump up 2 or 3, points there, that's significant for this team. And so, and they're not really relying a ton on the three. And I think that's, if you're breaking it down, free throws, 2-point, 3-point, that's still where they're getting, the fewer amount of shots is from the perimeter. So if you take that out of the equation, they are just so good in so many different areas. And you said it, if you look at Ken Baum, you look at all these different stats. They're a top 10 team offensively and defensively right now. The biggest takeaway is the word you said, Greg, is they are pulverizing teams. They are not just beating teams, they are beating teams unmercifully. And, of course, what they did at Arkansas, historic win there, to beat Arkansas on the road by 32 points in Bud Walton Arena, just not something we've seen teams do before. Doing that, and just seeing, again, how this team has come along, I can remember back, right after game 1, Bruce Pearl's like, defensively, I don't know what we're going to do. Basically, it's like, hey, we've got to figure some things out on the defensive end. Well, they've done that since then. They have been really, really good on that side of the floor. It helps when you probably have the best player in the SEC right now, Janai Broome. Everybody else, though, I think at this point, Greg, we talked about depth in the SEC coming into the season. I think Tennessee's right there. Other teams may be put in that conversation, but I think at this point, Auburn's the deepest team in the SEC, one of the deepest teams in the country. They look really, really good right now and seem to be a team that, not just saying, hey, we might be in the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. This might be a team that's, good enough to advance to a Final Four.
Yeah, this Auburn team, I really love what I'm seeing out of them. And right now they're looking like one of the creams of the crop out there in the SEC. As joining me on the show, we do have Mr. SEC, Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 14, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And then a game that we are going to be seeing for Wednesday. I think that this is just such a fascinating game. It is going to be that Ole Miss versus Florida game, because with Ole Miss, they take their first loss of the season. And I always think it's very telling when you've got a Vegas line with an Ole Miss team that's undefeated going to Tennessee over the weekend, and they were a double-figure underdog, and it was very much warranted with the way that they lost that game. And for Ole Miss, it felt like they were sort of living on borrowed time with regards to taking that first loss. But for Ole Miss, do you think that's actually maybe a little bit of a good thing that they took that loss because now they've got the pressure off of them? And how do you foresee them playing this game against a Florida team that I just was expecting more out of the offense? And even though Florida scores quite a few points, they don't do so very efficiently. And on the flip side, they give up quite a few points because they are taking a bunch of wild threes.
Yeah, that's the thing with Florida is like you could watch that game against Kentucky and see how it played out. And like I think just seeing Florida play a lot this season, I'm like, they had, the best half they played all season in the first half, and they hit 8 threes. And I'm like, this is just not something that I think is going to be sustainable in the second half, because when you looked at it, I think there are only 2 or 3 other games this season where they've hit more than 8 threes in the entire game. So you just kind of felt like it was going to revert back to that. And I think this does make for an interesting matchup. You said something that I've been sort of thinking about and wondering, is it great for Ole Miss just to take this right away? Like play Tennessee, play what is probably the best team in the SEC, top 5 team in the country, play them right away and immediately figure out, okay, guys, you know what the speech is Chris Beard's given. It's like, we were 13-0 and we just saw that doesn't mean a whole lot when you start playing teams like this. And so gets your attention immediately, and you understand what it's going to take if you're going to be a team that makes the NCAA tournament and make this 13-0 start mean something. You're going to have to get better in a lot of areas if you want to compete with a team like Tennessee. But like you said, it's a great setup, I think, against Florida, who comes in feeling pretty deflated, I would think. They played well, and I came out of it feeling pretty good about Florida. But the problem is, if you're going to be a team like the Gators, who have struggled in some of these areas, they still struggle from the free throw line. Now you're going on the road to play an Ole Miss team that is going to try to grind you a bit. And we know these styles are just completely different, essentially, at times, in terms of how these two teams play. It does make for an interesting matchup. And I think it's an important matchup, right? Because these are two teams that are now sitting here at 0-1. You know kind of what the upcoming schedule looks like. I think Florida gets Arkansas at home, but then they got back-to-back road trips, play Tennessee and Missouri. And then you look at kind of, again, where Ole Miss is at right now after a great start. Then I think they've got to play Vanderbilt at home, who seems to be getting better. Then they've got 2 road games against LSU and Auburn. Again, 2 teams that are certainly trending in the right direction. So it's a big game for both of these teams, and I feel like this is one where let's see who is able to kind of control the tempo here. That might be what makes the difference.
Yep, absolutely. And with this Ole Miss team, I want to see a little bit more defensively out of them as well. Giving up 90 points to a much improved Tennessee offense is something that really catches my eye. And I know that, Blake, you have been someone that has been quite high on Tennessee, and there were some bumps in the road for Tennessee. I'm looking at that game in which they gave up 60 points in the first half against North Carolina, a little bit less than savory, but it really feels like over the last month or so, they've been able to figure it out. I don't know which game it was. Perhaps it was the George Mason game. Perhaps it was the Illinois game. But ever since then, this team has really been on a roll. I just mentioned the fact that they took down Ole Miss the way that they did. Now they do have to go up against the Mississippi State team, by the way, that has Solo Smith back in the fold. So that is going to be a whale of a game for Wednesday. But what do you make out of really both of those teams that we're going to be seeing on Wednesday? Because both of these teams have had bumps in the road. But I look at both of these teams, and they still have tremendous defenses. And both teams have elevated their offenses from past years as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the biggest difference, I think, when you're looking at this team for Tennessee and comparing them to some of the recent teams. Other than the Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield team, that was probably, 2018-19. That team was just fantastic on the offensive end. But, they weren't as good defensively. Like, they were good, but they weren't top 10 level defense that year. But now, again, in recent seasons, it's always been the frustration, right? It's like, Tennessee's going to hit these stretches where they just don't score. And they could have one of those at Mississippi State on Wednesday because, as you know, Greg, that's not an easy place to play. We've seen a lot of teams go into Starkville and really, again, Mississippi State just kind of grind them out, make them play their style. And I think that's what Chris Jan's going to try to do in this one. Again, this is going to be one of those games where if you look at Mississippi State, you see how they played against South Carolina immediately. One of the things I think that stands out is that, okay, you go 3 of 13 from 3 on the road, in that kind of situation. And so you start to see them backtrack a little bit 3-point wise. They're not as bad as they were last year, but they are going to still need to be able to have that, at their disposal if they're going to be able, because right, we know, too, teams are going to be putting attention on Tolu Smith now that he's back in the fold. So you think of it from a matchup standpoint, there probably are going to be a lot of teams daring Mississippi State to try to beat them from 3 because it worked last year as a formula. It probably still works to an extent this year, and they turned the ball over a little bit this year, too. They've got to fix that a little. And again, that's not a great setup when you're playing a team like Tennessee. These are two teams that I keep going back to it, right? It feels like these two teams are going to win a lot of games the rest of the way, just because they are going to defend better than probably most teams in the SEC, maybe outside of Auburn. They're just going to make it a grind at times. But the difference is, like you said, they both seem to be better on the offensive end. So even if they are in situations where the other team's hitting shots, you feel like they can counter that a little bit better this year, whether it's with a Josh Hubbard stepping up for Mississippi State or Dalton Connect being able to step up for Tennessee or anyone else really on that Tennessee team right now, that they've kind of hit a groove, it seems.
Yep, they certainly have been able to hit a groove, and I am going to be thoroughly fascinated by what we do see in that game on Wednesday as well between two very rock-solid defenses and a pair of teams that have found a little bit more three-point shooting. So that is going to be a lot of fun to be able to dive in on. As joining me on the show, we do have Blake Lovell, who does absolutely tremendous work over at Southeastern 14, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Blake, when it comes to what we are seeing in terms of SEC play thus far, what have you really made out of it? Because we've taken a look at a few teams that we've been surprised about to the positive and the negative, and we're about a week and a half in, but have there been any real takeaways / anything that you've noticed that's been a little bit different this year about SEC play rather than what you've seen in past years?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Greg, I think it's probably kind of a similar theme in that I feel like there are teams offensively that feel pretty good about where they're at. And, sometimes in SEC play in recent years, we've kind of turned into, boy, some of these games are going to be ugly. Some of these games are going to be a rock fight. And you're still going to get some of that because I do think some of these teams are going to get better defensively. But I almost feel like it's kind of a year where the offenses may sort of reign supreme in some of these, right? Because like we said, you're talking about Tennessee, Mississippi State. They've gotten better offensively. We've talked about Auburn, Kentucky. Look at what they're doing on that end of the floor. Florida's better offensively, I think, than they are defensively. Alabama, we can certainly say the same thing for that. Alabama certainly has a case to be the best offensive team in the country. So when you just kind of break it down that way, I mean, look at what South Carolina's done too, right? Think about how far they've come, and they're a top 50 offensive team right now. It makes for kind of a really fun, I think, league this year where you're going to see a lot of really good offensive talent on display. And you may not see as many sort of elite defensive teams as we've seen in recent years, again, outside of maybe less than a handful of teams, whether it's Tennessee, Mississippi State, Auburn, teams like that. So I think that's probably going to be the biggest difference in terms of seeing how games play out this year. You feel like there's going to be more higher scoring games. You've already seen some of that already. I feel like, that makes for exciting basketball in a league where, again, at times you've seen some of those, 60 to 58 games, 50 to 48 type games. We've seen a few too many of those maybe in recent years.
Oh, we certainly have seen a few too many of those. And, we did see a few blasts from the past in the SEC over the weekend with Arkansas scoring 51 points. We saw Texas A&M score 53 as well. And Blake, I do need to ask you about that as well. What do we make out of this Arkansas team right now? Because we see it time and time with Arkansas. They always struggle a little bit early, and I feel like we say it every year as well. It's like, man, it feels like it's getting later and later with regards to the rise, and I just don't know what to make out of this team right now because I'm not surprised that they lost to Auburn. That's a forgivable loss, even though it was at Bud Walton. But the fact that they scored 51 points in that game, I just can't remember Arkansas in January ever looking quite this bad. Even last year where I felt like I never recognized this Arkansas team looking quite as bad in January until last year.
This feels different, and I just was not expecting to say that with this team because you talked about it, Greg, going into the season. Like, you could look at this roster and say, wow, like Muss has done it again. I mean, you just looked on paper and you're like, okay, look at all the guys he's brought in. They all seem to fix some of the needs that they had, improve three-point shooting. You've got your defensive stopper back in Devo Davis. You've got Trevin Brazile back, one of the best players in the league at his best. All of these things just seem to connect where you're like, this is it. Like, maybe they're not going to have those stretches this year. Well, they started early this year, not just losing to UNC Greensboro, but just the way they lost to an Oklahoma, North Carolina, games like that, even games they're winning that have been close. You're like, oh, they should have played better there. But then you have this, and this is a new level. Like I said, we have not seen anything like what we saw on Saturday in that game against Auburn in the Eric Musselman era. And I think that is a little bit concerning because you don't just come in and it's interesting, right? The first half, you think about how that game played out. If you just watch the first half and then all of a sudden you didn't watch the rest of it and you just caught up on the score afterwards, you'd be like, what happened? Like, how did that happen? Again, I'm sure there's a lot of people watching that game that have a lot of opinions as to what just happened, but it's hard not to look at this for Arkansas and say, do they get this figured out this year? Because that's the kind of performance where, I mean, let's call it what it is. If you're talking about a team that feels like it just sort of bottomed out, that's it. That's the kind of performance to where you almost feel like there's nowhere to go but up. But the problem is they don't have a very easy schedule to start SEC play. They got to go to Georgia. They got to go to Florida. Georgia is playing very well, as we know. Then they got to come home, play A&M, South Carolina, go to Ole Miss, play Kentucky after that. So Arkansas has so little room for error right now. If he's not able to get their attention after that performance, then this is going to be essentially a lost season for Arkansas, which, again, I was just not expecting.
Oh, no, I was not either, and I wasn't surprised when they took a few losses early on during the season, though the UNC Greensboro loss, that was a little bit off-putting as well, but man, failing to get to 55 points over the weekend, that's just something that you don't expect. As Blake Lovell, who does such great work over at Southeastern 14, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and certainly that's one of the biggest surprises in all of college basketball right now. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, but looking outside the SEC, is there a team or two that stands out to you, whether it be to the positive or the negative, that you take a look at and you've been quite surprised by over the last few weeks, and they're going on your radar a little bit more, whether that be to the good or the bad?
Yeah, I think, Greg, again, there's probably quite a few teams you could choose from here, but me, it's a couple in these power conferences, and I think you start with Wake Forest, which is just, I think back to watching the game they played against LSU. That was all the way back, and I want to say mid-November. They lost that game in overtime. I think at that point they had moved to like 2-3 on the season, something like that, and they'd already lost to Georgia too, by the way. I remember watching that game. But since then, you see what they've done. They got the double-digit win against Florida. You see what they're doing now in ACC play, getting the overtime win against Miami. Beat up on Virginia Tech. I just really like what Steve Forbes put together there. That's just a really good offensive team. You see the way they shoot the ball, very efficient, and it's just fun to watch them, I think, offensively right now. I don't know what the stat is, Greg. I think they scored 82 or 83 or more like in their last 6 games or something. I really like the way that Wake Forest team is playing. We've talked about Steve Forbes before, even back when he was at ETSU. That's a guy that can coach. There's going to be a lot of programs out there, I guarantee you, that would certainly like to have a look at Steve Forbes, maybe other places. I just feel like he is someone that's going to be in high demand here moving forward based on what he's doing right now. And then the other one, I was very kind of keyed in on that Texas Tech and Texas game on Saturday. Of course, as you know, Greg, because Texas is going to be in the SEC next year, and just kind of seeing, where the Longhorns stand. But, you see what this Texas Tech team is doing right now. They've won, 7 in a row, I think, at this point. Again, watching them play against Texas, seeing a lot of them, which they beat Vanderbilt, which at the time Vanderbilt was not playing well. We just kind of see what they've done this season, really outside that overtime loss at Butler, the game against Villanova. That's another team that feels pretty balanced right now with what Grant McCasland has done. We'll see how things continue to go as they start to get into the grind of Big 12 play. But those are two teams that I think, just based on maybe what the preseason expectations were and how they're playing right now, hard not to be impressed with what both of those coaches are doing with those teams.
Oh, there is no question about it. And for Wake, it was looking a little bit rough for them towards the beginning part of the season because they were without Afton Reed. They were dealing with injuries, and they have yet to get Jabari Monsanto back to the fold as well. When Jabari Monsanto comes back, that is a guy that's able to knock down threes as well, just like a man that is able to give out such great analysis and does such a good job looking at the sport. That'd be you, Blake. You're always appreciated on this podcast. You do tremendous work over at Southeastern 14, so let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Greg. Like you said, you can check out all of our SEC stuff on Southeastern 14 on YouTube. You can find us there. All my other stuff for college basketball related on Twitter/X at the Blake Lovell.
Blake does such an incredible job taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball, and it's always great to get him to lend his insights on this podcast. So big thanks to Blake for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by Blake Lovell. He does such good work over at Southeastern 14. Taking a look at this great game of college basketball. Obviously, as you can tell from the name, does such a good job taking a look at all these teams out there in the SEC. But on top of that, he does an incredible job just taking a look at all 362 D1 teams. Every single time he joins this podcast, he lends tremendous insights to us in what is going to be a very fascinating SEC moving forward. So, big thanks to Blake for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this College Basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNet_D1. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. We go in time order with regards to the bigger conference games, and then these are the smaller conferences that will be at the bottom and in the extra games. This will be the Patriot League, the Atlantic Sun, the NEC, the Big South, and any games involving independents. That would be Chicago State. I do think that they're in play in this Wednesday slate, so those will be the games at the bottom. So let's get things started with 669, 670 on the betting board. It is IUPUI, Old IUPUI, playing host to UW Green Bay. Green Bay is a road favorite of 7 points, and your total on this game, it is 134 to 135, and semi-total at 130.5. I'm going to be looking at the under flat out. I just don't think that IUPUI is going to be able to do their part with this total. IUPUI is in the bottom 20 in darn near every offensive metric that you can find, as Jalen Conner has done a nice job for the team. He's supplying 14.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shoots 36.5% from 3, but IUPUI is a bottom 75 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game, 14.5 turnovers per game. They shoot 25% from 3 now. They actually do shoot 75% of the free throw line, so that's actually not too bad, but really, other than Jalen Conner along with Quincy Samuels, who gives you 5.5 rebounds per game, nobody else on the roster gives you north of 3.1 rebounds per game. So that should allow for Elijah Jones, who's been able to supply for the CW Green Bay team right around about 6.5 rebounds per game, to be able to win that battle. And then you've got Noah Reynolds, who's going to be by far the best player out there on the floor. Comes in from Wyoming, where he was a double-figure scorer last year in the Mountain West. Has turned the ball over 3 times per contest, but shoots 36% from 3, 3.5 boards, 4 assists, 18 points per game. Now, he and Jones are the only guys on the roster that are logging north of 7.5 points per game, but Foster Wonders has been able to give you a little bit more transfer from Southern Illinois. He's been able to make a few threes. And for UW Green Bay, this team has really been able to do a solid job of batting down the hatches when it comes to their defense, as for UW Green Bay, they have now allowed fewer than 65 points in 3 of their last 5 games, and one of those games was against a Wright State team that gave up 88 to them, so they've been able to do a great job on that front. Meanwhile, for IUPUI, it's just been an almighty struggle for this offense. If you look at D1 games, because they played quite a few games against non-Division I teams, this team has exceeded the 70-point plateau just twice thus far this season, and this is also a 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern time game, so this is going to be an early one. Typically, that helps out the home team a little bit, but with the way that IUPUI is playing right now and the way that UW Green Bay, I'm not saying they're amazing on defense, but has really been able to buff up a little bit more defensively, going up against an IUPUI team that, on top of their offensive woes on defense, they've now given up 75 plus in each of their last 3 games. I think that it's going to be an almighty struggle. With UW Green Bay playing slowly as well, I think that you get a low-scoring game. So I total 130.5, diving in on the under. At the UW Green Bay, want to lay up to 8 with them, made them an 8.5 point favorite. 671, 672 on the betting board. It is Penn State playing us to Northwestern. Northwestern does find themselves as a road favorite of between 1 and 1.5 points. Total on this game is there between 141.5 and 142. Not willing to lay anything more than the 1.5, but going to be willing to lay it with Northwestern. With this Penn State team, they've done a good job of being able to amp up their turnovers. Mike Rhodes always does a solid job of being able to get his teams to be able to force some turnovers. Ace Baldwin has been able to give you north of 2 steals per contest, chipping in there right around about 13 points per contest. And Kudus Wahab down low has been able to give you 8 plus rebounds per game, but it's a relatively rough state of affairs for a Penn State team that they're looking to play a different style in the Big Ten. And when you've got a team that is looking to zag while other teams zig, it typically either goes very, very well or very, very awfully, and there's really not a lot of in between. And right now for Penn State, they are just getting lambasted night in and night out. Credit to them for being able to knock off Michigan, but Michigan is right now in a pit of misery. And for Penn State, they do rank 316th in the country in terms of rebound rate. This is a Northwestern team that they themselves have their issues down low. They're only about 245th in the country in terms of rebound rate. Bork Speinheiser is the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, but Northwestern does a really good job of being able to take care of the ball, and they themselves are a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Each of their top 4 scorers, Barnizer, Boo Buie, Ty Berry, Ryan Langborg, have all been able to give you at least a steal per contest. Langborg and Berry combined for 24 points on 42% three-point shooting, and then Boo Buie, mid-30s three-point shooter, but also does a nice job giving you 5 assists, 18 points per game, and late in games, you're able to feel very secure about this Northwestern team, which each of their top 5 scorers shooting at least 73.3% at the free throw line. Northwestern, a top 15 team once again in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. basis. I do think that they're going to be able to take care of the ball against a Penn State team that is really looking to rip the ball away. And to the credit of Penn State, offense has certainly been there for this team. They have scored at least 72 points, and now each of their last, I believe, 8 games. But that said, this is a team that they have now given up at least 70 points in all but one of those games, and lone exception was against Lemoyne. Meanwhile, Northwestern has fallen outside the top 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Has been a little bit rough for them, but they're more of a slow and controlled team that I do think is going to be able to get up off the mat in this one. And it's a Northwestern team that actually has been able to do a little bit of a better job in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis and their overall defense when they've been on the road rather than at home, as they're giving up right around about 2.4 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. So I do think that Northwestern going to be able to slow this game down a little bit. It is a Penn State team that you tell that they're looking to play some solid defense. They're looking to be able to get things out of control, and I just think that Penn State is going to be able to stay in control. So I did set my line at 2. I'm going to be willing to lay with Northwestern. I did set my total at 140, so diving in on the under, and we'll take Northwestern. 673, 674 on the betting board. It is Providence. Say it through. They're facing off against St. John's. St. John's is a favorite of between 6 and 6.5 points, with your total 143 to 143.5. With St. John's, set them as a 6.5 point favorite. Here at the 6, it's a max I'm going to be willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. Providence has actually looked just fine without Bryce Hopkins in the fold. Hopkins, a very good scorer, and he certainly is missed on glass. That said, he was shooting less than 25% from three-point range as far this season, so that's been a little bit of an issue for a Providence team that still has a do-it-all player in Devin Carter that I like. 8 boards, 3 assists, steal and a half, 17 points per game among power conference players with at least 7.5 rebounds per game. I think that he's the only one that stands shorter than 6'6", so he's been able to do a nice job getting down low, getting those rebounds. Now, I do think that there's going to continue to be a little bit of regression with regards to this Providence team on offense, just because they are turning the ball over 13.5 times per contest, and with Hopkins dealing with injury, that does hurt this team quite a bit. Whether or not he's going to be good to go in this game is very much questionable. Meanwhile, you've got a St. John's team that they should be able to control things down low. Soriano giving you about 17.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. St. John's has had their own turnover woes, about 12 turnovers per contest, but Dennis Jenkins, 6 assists, 13 points per contest. I do love what he's able to bring to the table, and this is a St. John's team that they are quite a bit different when they are out there at either Carnesecca and or MSG, rather than when they are in a road/neutral court environment as well. This is a St. John's team that they shoot it pretty solidly from three-point range at home. They're shooting about 36.5% from 3, 32.7% in a road/neutral court environment, and they do have to go up against a Providence team that, even when they've been without Hopkins, they've been able to do a very solid job on defense. This is a Providence bunch in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 7th in all of college basketball, and in a road/neutral court environment, they're still a top 15 team with this regard. It is a St. John's team, though, that has been able to bulk up a little bit with regards to their defense. St. John's down in the top 85 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and a vastly different team at home, giving up 19.7 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road, with guys like Gary Duell and company not necessarily stepping up for this bunch in Providence. And for St. John's, they're still trying to sort out roles for guys like Chris Ledlum, Jordan Dingle. Guys are used to just completely commanding things, but Ledlum giving you 8 boards, 11 points per game, shooting in the high 30s from three-point range. Dingle being able to give you 10.5 points. It does feel like these guys have figured it out, and Rick Pitino, he knows what the heck he's doing on the sidelines, that has gotten this team firing all cylinders on offense with 80-plus points for their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Providence team that, in regulation, they really haven't allowed more than 72 points all season long. I do think that things are going to be slowed down a little bit with the St. John's offense, but I do think that they win from within with Joel Soriano along with Ledlum. So, did set my line at a 6.5. Here, the 6 going to be one to lay. Did set my total 142.5 as well, so also going under. 675, 676 on the betting board. Fort Wayne is going to be hitting the road face-off against Youngstown State. The Penguins waddle their way to being a 3.5 point favorite with your total of 155.5 to 157. I say Youngstown State is only a 2 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. It's a Youngstown State team that has really been able to improve their defense. Last season, they were pretty deplorable on the defensive side of things, and not to say that they're some sort of a world beater on defense, but they're about 148th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But this Fort Wayne team has really been able to put it together. The big bugaboo that Fort Wayne has had last few seasons has been the the fact that while they do shoot really well from three-point range, they turn the ball over a little bit too much. They've been able to cut that down to right around about 10 turnovers per contest. They've really gotten some good play out of Rasheed Bello. Comes in for a Division II UW-Parkside, lone Division II school out there in the state of Wisconsin, by the way, but he's been able to do a really nice job of just giving the team what they need. 15 points, 4 assists, 2 steals. He doesn't shoot a ball from three, but you've got two guys in Quentin Morton Robinson, coupled with Jalen Jackson, that are both bombing it north of 42% from three-point range. Morton Robinson, 2.5 assists, 13 points per contest. Jackson gives you 15 points per game. And under the radar for Fort Wayne, this has been one of the best road defenses in all of college basketball. Overall, a top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But if you look at them in a road/neutral-court environment, a top 20 team in all of college basketball, going up against a Youngstown State team that they're just not shooting the same from three-point range this year as they did a season ago. Now, they do have a more dominant rebounder than they had a season ago, and DJ Turner-Burns, he's been able to give you about 11 points, 8 rebounds per contest, so do love what I'm seeing on that front end. This is a Youngstown State team that they're okay at being able to contain the three-point arc, as this is a team that they're about league average with that regard. They're about 164th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage, with having Brandon Rush, Ziggy Reed being able to give you about 25 points per contest. Reed has been able to shoot about 39% from three, and you've had Mr. Brett Thompson be able to shoot 38% from the outside, about 11 points per game, but it is a little bit of a top-heavy Youngstown State team. Meanwhile, with Fort Wayne, even someone like a Maximus Nelson has been able to do a solid job contributing 7 points, shooting it very well from three-point range. If there is a place where this IPFWEK Fort Wayne team can be at, it's a little bit on the glass, 343rd in the country with regards to rebound rate. That's not necessarily too terrific, but really outside of DJ Burns, not a ton for this Youngstown State team that is actually having a negative rebound rate at home thus far this season. So did somebody line it too? I'm going to be willing to take Fort Wayne with the points. Don't really want them outright on the money line, but do think that this is a nip and tuck game. With Fort Wayne's improved defense, I think it's going to be a lower scoring slug. Somebody total out of 152, going under and take the points with Fort Wayne. 677, 678 on the betting board. Furman plays those to the Citadel. Citadel is an 8-2 and 8.5 point underdog with your total between 147.5 and 148. And with the Citadel, set them as an underdog of 9.5 points. So you're at an 8-2 and 8.5. Going to be willing to lay it with Furman. Now, for Furman, this team has been getting just absolutely smoked on defense. Bottom 75 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But Furman actually doing a relatively solid job on the glass. 102nd in the country in terms of overall rebound rate. They do go up against the Citadel team that has actually been able to do a solid job on that front. They bring in Quentin Malora Brown. He was a starter over at Vanderbilt 2 seasons ago. He's been able to give the team 8 rebounds per game, and it's a big reason why the Citadel team is now a top 100 team with regards to overall rebound rate. But despite the fact that the Citadel has been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass, and they do have 2 guys that I really like in the backcourt, as you've been able to get right in the neighborhood about 16 points per contest out of A.J. Smith, shooting 39% from 3, and then Elijah Morgan, 46.5% three-point shooter, to be able to give you 14.5 points per game going up against a Furman team that, call it what it is, they've been getting completely smoked from three-point range. But the Citadel, just because they play slowly doesn't mean that they play great defense. This team is right around about 185th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and befuddlingly, this is a team that is also giving up right around about 5.4 points fewer per 100 possessions on the road rather than at home. Though I do think that they're going to meet their match against a Furman team that, despite the fact that the defense has been absolutely deplorable, for one, it's been significantly better at home. They're giving up 18.1 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside/neutral-court environment. And for two, they're going to have the best guard out there on the floor in J.P. Pigs. I should say the most well-rounded guard out there in Mr. Pigs, as he's been dealing with a little bit of injury but was able to return in that game against Chattanooga at 16 points, 11 boards, so he's ready to go. 18 points, 5.5 assists, 4.8 rebounds on just 2.3 turnovers per contest for a Furman team that they're shooting 29.5% from 3. They lost a lot of three-point shooting from a season ago, and they have been dealing with injury of their own, as Marcus Foster has been out of the fold. He, a season ago, was a 36% three-point shooter. It's not been seen really since early December, but I do think that things are going to trend in the right direction for this team. You've got Carter Witt, the transfer from Wake Forest, who's starting to get down the offense a little bit more. 3.5 assists, 1.5 steals per contest. Do like what I've seen out of him. And Furman, I do think, hit rock bottom when they took that loss against Anderson of South Carolina. That was a non-D1 school. The defense has been a little bit better recently. Offense now really leaving something to be desired, in all irony, as this team has failed to get to 75 points each of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Citadel team that they themselves have really really had a tough time being able to bust through with their offense against Division I opponents because they have played their fair share of non-D1 teams. This is a team that has been held to 71 points or fewer in all but one of their games thus far this season. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I do think that Furman going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low. I do think that the guards are going to start to hit some threes against a Citadel team that, once again, has been pretty solid on defense. They're a top 70 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but Furman has an uncanny way of being able to speed teams up, and I do think that the Citadel has a good chance to be able to get to that 71, 72-point number in this game. So I did set my total at a 149.5. I'm going to be looking at this 148 over, and with Furman, willing to lay up to 9 points with them. 679, 680 on the betting board. East Tennessee State is going to be playing us Western Carolina, and Western Carolina finds themselves at a pick'em game. Your total on this game between 141 and 142. Set my total at a 141.5, mostly seeing 142 out there, and I would rather have the 142 under because you've got a pair of teams here in Western Carolina and East Tennessee State that they're really not looking to push the tempo, especially this Western Carolina team, as they're building everything around Vontavious Woolbright, and Vontavious Woolbright has been tremendous. He's giving you right around 20 points, chipping in there 10-plus rebounds per game, but you just need to find a little bit more other than Trey Jackson to be able to help him out. Jackson has been superb. Last year gave the team 15-plus points per contest. I've seen a little bit of a dip there, more like 13 or so points per contest, but he's able to shoot it well from three-point range. But for Western Carolina, 294th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It's an ETSU team that they themselves are right around about 215th in the country, but for ETSU, they've been able to do a solid job defensively, about 140th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that's been a little bit of an issue for a Western Carolina team that overall they're about 134th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but we've seen things act up just a little bit for this bunch. I do think that they're going to have a bit of a tough time down low against someone like a Jaden Seymour, who's been able to do a nice job hauling in for the team right around about 6.5 rebounds per game, and has good versatility. For Seymour, he's been able to shoot north of 35% from three-point range, and then you've got Karen Boyd, who's been able to give about 7.5 boards, 8 points, and with this ETSU team, they've been able to hunker down just a little bit more with regards to taking care of the ball, about 12.5 turnovers per game. Now, the 39.4% field goal shooting percentage, that's been a little bit of an issue, and they do go up against a Western Carolina team that enters having won 7 straight games. A few of those games were against non-Division I teams, and a lot of these games have been very nip and tuck against Division I teams as well, but for ETSU, they themselves have given up 70 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games, and the offense has been able to click a little bit more as well, scoring 80-plus in 2 of their last 3 games against Division I opponents. Ibi Asamoah has been a big reason why, 15.5 points, shooting 37.5% from three-point range, and they go up against a Western Carolina team that, in terms of three-point shooting defense, they do rank just 231st in all of college basketball. I think that is going to be a big key in this game, and if ETSU can continue to do a relatively solid job on the boards, because you do have a Western Carolina team that, as a committee, they've been able to do a nice job, 61st in the country with that regard. Meanwhile, for ETSU, now you've got 2 very good rebounders on this team. They don't quite compare with that regard, 199th, but a better rebounding team at home rather than on the road. They should be able to get the job done, especially with Jaden Parker giving you a block and a half per contest as the North Florida transfer. So I did set this line to where I did set Western Carolina as a 1.5 point road favorite. I do favor them just a little bit because that rebound rate is so good, because Vontavious Woolbright has been able to do such a nice job in terms of being able to provide the team what they need, and for ETSU shooting under 30% from three-point range, that is a little bit concerning. So I did set Western Carolina as 1.5 point favorite. Western Carolina also allowing opponents to shoot under 32% from 3 on the road. So we're looking there, and did set my total 141.5 with the tempo of these 2 teams. So at a 142, looking under, and I like Western Carolina on this pick'em line. 681, 682 on the betting board. Central Florida plays us to Kansas. Kansas is a 6.5 to a 7 point favorite. Your total on this game between 142 and 143.5. With Kansas, made my line 7. So the 6.5 that I'm seeing is the max I'm going to be willing to lay, and I did see an opener of 6 as well. So this is starting to move in favor of Kansas, but still see a little bit of value as I record this, as this is a Kansas team that they need to get some things figured out on offense. What are you going to be able to get out of guys like Nicholas Timberlake, Johnny Furphy? But the one thing that is dialed in with this Kansas team, how about the way that they are playing on defense? Overall 31st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but in a road/neutral court environment, 8th in all of college basketball. Hunter Dickinson is going to be able to win that battle down low. This guy has been a double-double machine all season long. There's been no question as to what he's been able to provide for this team. And then you take a look at the flip side for the Central Florida bunch, and Central Florida has been able to do a really good job with their defense as well. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, number 4 in all of college basketball. Just at home, they're a top 10 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis as well. But for Central Florida, they have a tough time being able to put the ball in the basket from three-point range, shooting about 32% 42.3% from three-point range, as the transfer from Ball State, Jalen Sellers, last year shot 45% from distance. 2 years ago, 44.5% from three, shooting 25.7% from the outside this season. You do have to feel like that is going to be ticking up, but quite concerning what we've been seeing on that front. You've got a 41% three-point shooter in Marcellus Avery, who's been able to do a solid job helping out the Central Florida team as well. And though this Kansas team is a little bit top-heavy, I just don't think that there's anyone on that Central Florida side that compares to Kevin McCullough. 7 boards, 4.5 assists, 2.5, 20 points per game on 36.5% three-point shooting. And Dickinson, he's not going to continue to shoot 53% from three, but got an incredibly efficient point guard in DeJuan Harris, who I want to see him shoot a little bit more. Shoots 48% from three, 7 points, 7 assists. He's literally averaging just as many assists as point. And then Marco Jackson, he's had his moments. You want to see him burst a little bit more, but you know that the ability for Kansas is there. They've been able to get really good production on the defensive side of things, and the offense has all of a sudden come alive as well. 73 plus points each out of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Central Florida team that they have had a tough time getting past the 70-point plateau, as they have failed to do so in 3 out of their last 5 games. So this is a circumstance where I do think that the defense is going to really win out for both of these teams. I did set my total at a 139. I'm looking at the under, and with Kansas, 1 to lay up to 6.5 with them. 683, 684 on the betting board. Georgia Southern, it's ready to face off against Marshall, and Marshall does find themselves as 11.5 point favorites. Total on this game between 151.5 and 153. Got a Georgia Southern team that has one straight up win, and I think that is going to be maintaining here, and I think that this is going to be another double figure loss. I did set my line at a 12.5. I'm going to be 1 to lay it. It is a Marshall team that has been less than savory in terms of their offense thus far this season, but we got a Georgia Southern team that they are even worse with regards to their offense. As for Georgia Southern, they just can't get anything right. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 343rd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as Tyron Moore is right now having to do it all for the team. Moore has been solid, 13 points per contest, shooting 40.5% from three-point range, but if he's even slightly off, this team is in doomsday mode. Going up against a Marshall team that's been able to do a good job down low. Obiana Onchele Killian, 16 points, 6.5 boards, block and a half. He's now shooting 45% from three-point range. Now, it is still a Marshall team that is leaving much to be desired from three-point range. They're shooting as a collective well below 33% from the outside. But Nate Martin, the transfer from Texas State, has really been able to fortify things down low for a Marshall team that, at home, they've got a rebound rate of 52.8% overall in college basketball, 168th with this regard. That should be way more than enough against a Georgia Southern team that they had Carlos Curry average 7 rebounds per game last season. Now they just glued him to the bench. I have no idea why. They're 327th in the country in terms of rebound rate. Camden Curfpin, he's been able to help out this Marshall team as he's starting to find it from three-point range once again, giving you about 34% three-point shooting, double-figure amount of points per game. And then for Georgia Southern, they bring in someone like a Eugene Brown, who was over at Ohio State last season. He just hasn't been able to see the floor too much, and when he has been out there on the floor, he's been relatively ineffective. The backcourt has been dealing with darn near everyone, missing half the season due to injury. You just don't know who's going to be out there night in and night out, and that's really led to their perimeter defense being a complete and utter sieve, as well as for Georgia Southern, 325th in all of college basketball in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. And while this Marshall team is not doing the same job of being able to generate turnovers this year as they have a season ago, Keshawn Vols, who comes in from Maryland Eastern Shore, he's been able to give you about 1.7 steals per contest. And for a Georgia Southern team that's turning the ball over 14 times per contest, dealing with an injury to Deuce Dean, I do think that that's going to be a big, giant issue for them. So this is a circumstance where I did set Marshall as a 12.5 point favorite, 1 to lay it on Marshall. Still a top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game, but I just don't know if Georgia Southern's going to be able to do their part with this total, because they've just been so bad on offense. They've been so bad with regards to their defense. I mean, credit where credit is due. They knocked off Louisiana Monroe, but Marshall's starting to find it with their defense as well, giving up 75 points or fewer for their last 5 games. So did set my total at a 152.5 to have an under, and with Marshall willing to lay up to 12 with them. 685, 686 on the betting board. It is Wright State, and they hope to be the right side on the road against Robert Morris, as Robert Morris does find themselves as a home underdog of between 5.5 and 6 points. So on this game, they're between 160.5 and 159.5, and I did set my total at a 160. We're right now seeing a lot of 161s popping up as well, as that was the opening number. So anything north of a 160, I'm going to be willing to take a look at the under. Now, it is a Wright State team that has been deplorable on defense. 348 148th out of 362 Division I teams in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it's not like it's Robert Morris team has necessarily been anything to write home about defensively either, as they're 248th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But I do think that we're going to see a little bit of Coolidge with regards to this Wright State offense. The Wright State offense that legitimately has been solid, 21st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in a roadside neutral court environment that actually elevates into the top 15. But it's also a Robert Morris team that they just don't have a lot going on for them, especially from three-point range in the bottom 50 in the country with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. Robert Morris, 195th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. So it's a spot where I'm going to be taking a look at the under. You've also got a Robert Morris team that legitimately doesn't play overly fast, and it's not like Wright State has been playing at warp speed. This team is actually outside the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. They just have been hitting everything with Tanner Olden, Trey Calvin, combining for 37 points per contest, shooting between the two of them right around about 43.5% from three-point range. This Wright State team should be able to do a solid job down low as Holden, along with A.J. Braun, Brandon Noel. They'll give you between 5.6 and 7.5 rebounds per game. And then you get about 5 boards, 9 points per game out of Alex Ugbegasterici. Hopefully I said that correctly. Tough last name, but that said 9 points, 5 boards. It's a top-heavy Wright State team, which is why they don't necessarily play super-duper out of control, but they go up against the Robert Morris team that they just haven't been able to do a great job down low. And this is despite the fact that Marquise Hastings and Stephon Walker have been able to combine for about 13.5 rebounds per game. It is a Robert Morris team that's really struggling in all aspects with regards to rebounding, and when it comes to guarding the perimeter, that's really the lone thing that they've done well on defense. They're allowing opponents to shoot 30.6% from three-point range at home, so I do think that that is going to cool down Wright State a little bit, but Wright State does a significantly better job of being able to take care of the balls. Robert Morris just has not been able to find that main facilitator, as they're hoping that would be Justice Williams coming over from LSU, 12.5 points, 2.5 assists, but 2.7 turnovers per game, 14 turnovers as a collective for Robert Morris, shooting about 32% from three-point range, and for Wright State, it certainly has been out of control for this defense, as for Wright State, they have given up 70-plus points in, I believe, every single one of their games, except for that game against Illinois State thus far this season, so that has been wild. Meanwhile, you've got a Robert Morris team that they themselves have been all out of control with regards to both their offense and their defense. This is a bunch that they've not been able to get to at least 75 points so far their last 5 games. Very much a byproduct of playing the likes of UW Milwaukee, IUPUI, St. Francis of Pennsylvania, and company, as this is still not necessarily too up-tempo of a team. I do think that with Robert Morris, they're going to do a nice job being able to guard the three-point arc, but I do think that Wright State is going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low. I do think that being able to generate some second and third chances with A.J. Braun, Brandon Noel, and company is going to win out for a Wright State team that they've been able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. They are about 85th in the country in terms of overall rebound rate. You've got a Robert Morris team that is 222nd, and I think that that's going to be the difference in the game. Did set Wright State as a 6-point favorite, going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 with them. I do think we're going to see a little bit of three-point shooting regression, semi-total at 160, so also diving under. 687, 688 on the betting board. St. Joe's hopes to not be average. Joe's on the road against St. Louis, and St. Louis is an underdog of between 5 and 6 points. Your total is between 150.5 and 152. Did set my line at a 5.5. So at 6, that is my buy point on St. Louis. St. Louis has had a tough time being able to get things going, but it does feel like they've been able to fortify themselves a little bit, and it feels like they've just been able to find their sea legs in general, for lack of a better term. It is a St. Louis team that is going to have a little bit of a tough time on the glass, 242nd in the country in terms of overall rebound rate, and they go up against the St. Joe's team that they've just been so stout defensively. We all want to talk about St. Joe's and this offense. They've been one of the better three-point shooting mid-major teams in all of college basketball, and St. Joe's legitimately has been a very efficient offense as well. 75th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis overall, but if you look at them in a road/neutral court environment, this team elevates into the top 35, so I've been very impressed there, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, that's really where the St. Joe's team has thrived. 26th in the country. Problem is, they are giving up about 18.8 points more per 100 possessions in a road/neutral court environment rather than at home, and this is a St. Louis team that can crank up the tempo on you. You got Gibson Jimerson, who's able to give you 16.5 points from three-point range, shooting 36.5% from the outside, and for St. Louis, they do as a whole shoot about 37.3% from three-point range. They do have to go up against a bunch in the St. Joe's team that has been able to do a relatively solid job with Rasheer Fleming now being able to give you some plus rebounds per game. That has been a big giant struggle for the St. Louis team, so you do have your issues there, but that said, for St. Louis, they've had to mix and match ever since Sincere Parker has been out of the fold due to injury. I know that Mike Meadows has been in and out with regards to his facilitation as well, but the freshman in Sion Medley has been able to do a nice job job, giving you multiple assists, giving you a little bit defensively as well. Not too much of a scorer, but does shoot about 33% from three-point range. Now for St. Joe's, Eric Reynolds has been awesome. 17 points, 3 assists, shoots 41% from three for a St. Joe's team that they shoot as collective about 36.5% from three. And then Lynn Greer has been able to do a nice job of teaming up with Xavier Brown for a combined about 7.5 assists per contest. These two guys combined for about 24 points per game. And for St. Joe's, it's really all about that starting five. Your main five will be able to give you at least 11 points per game, every one of them. Nobody else on the roster really gives you north of 5.3 points per game. And with the way that St. Louis has had to operate, they've got so many interchangeable pieces that I do think that those different looks actually makes them a little bit stronger. I do think that St. Joe's, 25th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It's solid. They've been a little bit fortunate with some of that shooting, though, and I do think that St. Louis going to be able to buckle down as they're allowing opponents to shoot just 29.5% from three-point range at home. So this is a spot where I'm going to be willing to take 6+ here with St. Louis, set my line at a 5.5. So this is a spot where I'd rather take 6 rather than lay 5. And with regards to total, did set mine at a 147.5, as I do think that there's going to be a little bit of coolage with the St. Joe's three-point shooting percentage, and St. Louis not necessarily playing at warp speed with all the injuries. So looking at the under and going to be willing to take the points with the Billiken. 689, 690 on the betting board. It is Temple, and we give our O to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, a play us to East Carolina. East Carolina is a 2 to a 2.5 point underdog with your total 141 to 141.5. And with East Carolina, I did set them as a 2-point underdog. So now that we're getting to 2.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points. It's an East Carolina team that has been playing quite slowly. They're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. And if you look at the overall season numbers for East Carolina, they're not good on defense. 206th in the country, but if you take out the games in which Brandon Johnson was either dealing with illness or was completely out of the fold, this has been more of a league average to a slightly above average defense, and they go up against a Temple team that they themselves have had their issues on defense, especially at home, allowing opponents to shoot just 35.4% from three-point range. And though East Carolina certainly has been giving up some open three-point looks as well, this is a Temple team that they just have not been able to knock down their shots. You've got for Temple a guy, Michael Piccarelli, who's been able to give you about 35% three-point shooting. He's been able to do a relatively okay job for the team. And for Temple, you do have a lot of interchangeable pieces. Someone like a Heisier Miller has been nice with 17.5 points, 4.5 assists per contest. Down low, you do have Sam Hoffman, who's been able to give you 7 rebounds per game. And for the Temple team, you actually do have 4 separate guys that have been able to contribute at least 5.5 rebounds per game. But for Johnson, he's been able to do a very solid job being able to give you about 14 points, 8 boards. He chips in there a mid-30s three-point shooting percentage. RJ Felton has also been able to give you 16 plus points per contest, as really for East Carolina, each of your top 3 scorers have all been able to give you at least 5.5 rebounds per game. And then you've got Bobby Pettiford, who's got an assist-to-turnover ratio that hovers right around 3. He's been able to do a nice job chipping in there about 9 points, shoots in the low/mid-30s from three-point range. So I do like what all these guys have been able to bring to the table. And it is a Temple team that, despite the fact that you've got those guys that give you 5+ rebounds per game, they're just 254th in the country in terms of rebound rate. East Carolina more around about 130th, though they have had their struggles on the road with this. But I do think that for Temple, because they're not necessarily stout inside, and because, this is an Adam Fisher coach team. He comes over from Penn State. He's supposed to be instilling three-point shooting. They just haven't done a lot of that. This is a Temple team that's just out of sorts right now. So I do like East Carolina taking the points. I don't want them outright on the money line, but I think that this is a nip-and-tuck game. So set my line at 2, being able to get 2.5. I'm going to be looking at those points. I did set my total at a 142 as well. I do think that you get just enough offense with both of these teams outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and a Temple team that's in the top 75 in terms of total possessions to be able to get this game over. So looking at the over and the points with East Carolina. 691, 692 on the betting board. It is Charlotte. They play host at Tulsa, and Tulsa does find themselves as an underdog of 7.5 points. Total on this game between 132.5 and 133.5, and with Charlotte, I did set them as a favorite of 7.5 points. So right now, sitting on my number, this was an opener of 7, and if we do get back to the opener of 7, and I'm seeing 1 or 2 out there right now, I'm willing to lay that with this Charlotte team. Tulsa has really good metrics. They're still a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But what scares me about Tulsa is 2 things. For 1, they have played against one of the most Sherman soft schedules in all of college basketball. And for 2, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they are a bottom 50 team in all of college basketball. With north of 15 turnovers per game, they were relying upon bringing in quite a few guys from Louisiana Tech to be able to help this team out. And certainly they've been able to get some nice production out of transfer PJ Haggerty. He's been able to give you about 17.5 points per contest. And I do like what you're able to get when he's out there on the floor from Kobe Williams, who's been able to give you about 12.5 points per contest, shoots in the low 30s from three-point range. But but Keston Willis was coming over to play for Coach Eric Conkle as well after he coached him up over at Louisiana Tech 2 seasons ago. He's only been out there for 2 games, has been dealing with injury, and he should be out of the fold once again now. Tulsa, they've been able to do a nice job gambling for steals and being able to get them 9 steals per contest, and they do a nice job shutting down the 3-point arc, but this is a Charlotte team that they're in control and they really don't rely upon the 3-ball too much, which is a little bit of a changeover from what we saw last season. Last season, this was a Charlotte team that was very much based around 3-point shooting. Now they're only shooting in that neighborhood about 31% from 3, but that said, they've been able to get quite a bit more down low with Igor Milicic being able to give you about 8.5 boards. He's shipping in there 12 points per game. Lucille Patterson has done a very solid job with about 14 points. It's a team that does a really good job with their interchangeable parts of being able to throw out the ball, as you've been even able to get a little bit of something out of Isaiah Folks, who's been able to give you about 2 assists, a few points per game. He's really been able to elevate in the last few contests for this team, as well as he's been averaging right around about 2.5 assists to only about 1 turnover per game in the last 5 as well. With Milicic, he also shoots 35% from 3-point range as well. And Charlotte, once again, playing at a very slow and controlled rate. This is a bunch that has given up 68 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Do have to wonder if they're feeling a little bit high after that big win that they were able to pull off against Florida Atlantic, but I do think that Charlotte is going to be able to stay even keel here. I do think that they're going to be able to do also a pretty solid job on the glass as well. This team is just 206th in the country with that regard, but their rebound rate more around 53.7% at home compared to 46% on the road. Tulsa being outside the top 230 with this regard, and Tulsa, I think, being doing for some 3-point shooting regression as well is going to lead to this Charlotte team being able to get the job done. So being able to get 7 or less, I'm going to be one to lay this number, and I do think that we continue to get slugs with this Charlotte team. Did semi-total at a 133.5. Here at the 132, 133, I'm going to look over, as you do have a Tulsa team that is in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game, and I do think that 3-point shooting defense is going to regress. So going to be taking a look at the over. Also, you have late game fouling as a option as well, and I'm going to be one to lay up to 7 with Charlotte. 693, 694 on the betting board. It is Northern Kentucky, and they're going to be hitting the road facing off against Oakland, and the Grizzles find themselves as 4-point favorites. Their total on this game in between 148.5 and 149. Did semi-total at a 144. I'm diving in on the under. You've got 2 teams that are really slowing down their tempo. They're not necessarily efficient on defense. Either of these teams within the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in Oakland. Their Achilles heel is popping up once again. They're back outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. But that said, I just don't think that you get enough possessions to be able to go over in this game. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under. Northern Kentucky, 226th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got an Oakland bunch that they're clocking in 242nd, which is really a downtick with regards to their tempo from a season ago. But I did set Oakland as a 7-point favorite, and the big reason why is that Northern Kentucky just has not been able to get a lot of rebounding. Last year, they were completely reliant upon Chris Brandon, who was able to give them 9.5 rebounds per game. Ever since he has been out of the fold, they have yet to really find that guy that's able to give them north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, this is an Oakland team that they should be able to control the boards with Trey Townsend and everything that he's been able to give this bunch. 15.5 points, 7.8 boards, 3.5 assists, and does shoot 36% from 3-point range. It's really been on one recently, 8+ rebounds in each of the team's last 4 games, and that's something that I don't think that a Northern Kentucky team that only shoots about 32% from 3, 69% the free throw line is able to compare it to. Now, with Northern Kentucky, they play a lot of games with a lot of turnovers as well, which is also why I do look at this total under, because I do think that there's going to be a lot of dead possessions for Northern Kentucky. They turn the ball over about 13 times per contest, but they generate 9 steals as well, with Sam Vincent being the main man. 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2.5 steals, 13.5 points per contest, and then your main scorer, Marcus Warwick, is able to give you about 20 points per contest. But this is a bunch that I thought was going to get a little bit more out of the Marquette transfer in Keon Itajiri, who's only been able to give you about 7.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, this is an Oakland team that they continue to have rocket watts, just not be very useful for this bunch. But what I really do like for the team, Blake Landman, he was out of the fold for a little bit due to injury. Ever since he has returned, the team has really been able to elevate with their offense. They've been able to get past the 75-point plateau in each of their last 3 games. For Mr. Lampman, he's been able to shoot 37% from 3-point range. It is an Oakland team that still is leaving a little bit of something to be desired from the outside, but you've been able to have a good team in terms of being able to mix and match on the boards. Meanwhile, for Northern Kentucky, if you take a look at them in terms of overall rebound rate, it has been very rough. 270th in all of college basketball. I think that is a place where they're really going to get lambasted. And the big key for this Oakland team is that they know that they're going to give up their threes. They need to be pretty rock solid with regards to driving teams inside inside, forcing them to be able to take some twos, and they themselves being able to execute on this shot for Northern Kentucky, 252nd in all of college basketball, and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Oakland, they're more around 246, but I do think that with Oakland, they're going to be able to do just enough inside to be able to get the job done, which is why I did set them as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. And with both of these teams playing at a slower tempo, did set my total 144. So diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Oakland. 695, 696 on the betting board. It is Liberty, and old Liberty Bibberty is going to be playing us to Jacksonville St. Jacksonville St does find themselves as an underdog of 10 points. Your total on this game is staying between 127.5 and 128. And with Liberty, I did make them a favorite of 16 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. For Jacksonville St, they've been able to do a solid job on defense. This is a team that ranks in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but now they have to face off against a Liberty team that they're just so well-rounded. A top 100 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. For Liberty, they can be had a little bit more inside when they're on the road, but at home, they allow opponents to shoot just 41.8% from 2-point range. That is a mark that ranks in the top 45 in all of college basketball. They go up against a Jacksonville St team that has been relatively solid in terms of being able to guard the 3-point arc, but you can tell that this is a Jacksonville St team that's just not the same when they're in a road/shoot-your-court environment rather than when they are at home. As for Jacksonville St overall this season, right around 48th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but that rises by about 4.2% when they're in a road/shoot-your-court environment, and now they have to face off against a Liberty team where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts this season. They lost Sirius McGee, their top scorer from a season ago, but you've got Kyle Rohde, who just provides winning plays for this team. He gives you like 13 points. He gives you like 5 boards, 3 assists. At 6'7", he's able to bomb it from 3-point range. They go up against the Jacksonville St team that they just need to get a little bit more support around Kai Tandy, who's been tremendous. Coming in from Xavier, 19.5 points. He's able to shoot 41% from 3-point range, but it's a Jacksonville St team that is in the bottom half of all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, yet they turn the ball over 14 times per contest. Outside of Tandy, you don't have a single other guy that gives you north of 8.7 points per game, as Quincy Clark is giving you 3 assists, right around 8.5 points per contest, and Marcellius Brigham, along with Ron Purdue, have been able to combine for about 11 rebounds per game, but I do think that they're going to be getting lambasted down low, as well as you've got so many guys that are able to do a solid job for this Liberty team of pulling in their rebounds. You really don't have any primary rebounder other than Mr. Joseph Van Zandt, who's been able to give you right around about 8 or so rebounds per game. Liberty, though, 57.5% rebound rate at home. That is a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. They go up against a Jacksonville St team that, despite the fact that they don't have that one fortified rebounder, they are about a top 50 team in terms of overall rebound rate, but I do think that for this Liberty bunch, they're going to be able to do a solid job holding up with their own 3-point shooting, as well as for this Jacksonville St team. They can be had quite a bit more down low, with Liberty having so many guys that are able to piecemeal things together, being able to shoot it from 3-point range, someone like a Bodie Pebbles, being able to give you double figures, shooting north of 37% from 3-point range, and this is a Liberty team that as a whole, they're a top 50 team in terms of overall 3-point shooting percentage, and when it comes to the way that they defend the 3-point ball, especially at home, they've been able to do a relatively solid job with that regard. Opponents are shooting just 28.8% from 3-point range at home against Liberty, so it is a circumstance where I did set my line at a 16. I do think that Liberty going to be able to utilize that so slow and controlled style and just dominate this Jacksonville St team, and I do think that Jacksonville St, they're going to be having a tough time with this Liberty team that, with regards to their offense, they've been able to get to at least 79 points in 3 of their last 5 games, and for Jacksonville St, they themselves have heated up a little bit with their offense, 70-plus points in each of their last 4 games, so did set my total 128, here at a 127.5, looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Liberty, who set them as a 16-point favorite. Now you get my DK Network right to pick, 697, 698 on the betting board. Tennessee, it's the road face-off against Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a home underdog of 2 points. Your total on this game in between 139.5, and now this has ascended to as high as a 141, and hopefully this can continue to climb, as the opener was 138.5, and I am Oppo Taco on this one. My DK Network write-up, that is going to be on the under in this spot. You've got 2 teams that are in the top 15 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of one-and-done sort of possessions in this game, as these are 2 of the better teams in the country with regards to rebound rate. Mississippi State, they're able to elevate even further to their top 25 mark in terms of rebound rate without getting Tolu Smith back in fold. For Tolu Smith, 14.5 points, 6.5 boards as far this season. After last year, he was the team's top scorer. He had north of 15 points, logged north of 8 rebounds per game, but it's not like he necessarily did a lot to be able to elevate the offense. Last year, Mississippi State was well outside the top 150 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They've actually been a little bit better this year, ranking more around 95th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Big reason why is that they're not dead last in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage anymore. Big thanks to Josh Hubbard, who's been able to give the team 14.5 points, shooting now 38% from three-point range as a true freshman. But I do think that for Mississippi State, they're going to be able to do a solid job down low with having Jimmy Bell along with Cameron Matthews still being able to combine for north of 15 rebounds per game. But that said, I do like Tennessee in the spot just because with Tennessee, they've been able to sort things out a little bit more with their offense. They've gotten to at least 74 points in 6 out of their last 7 games. But if you look at the defenses that they played, all but one of them, the defense that they played against in Illinois, they are all outside the top 80 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So they have been beating up on lesser competition. I like what I'm seeing down low out of Toby Awaka. Not necessarily giving you a ton in terms of scoring, but he has given the team 11 plus rebounds in 2 of the last 4 games. You've been able to get really good facilitation as well out of Zakai Ziegler. Right around 9 points, 5 assists per contest, and it's a Tennessee team that's now shooting about 34% from three-point range. It's not amazing, but you know what? It's better than what it has been in past years with bringing in Jordan Gainey and Dalton Connect, especially Connect, as he has been connecting from three-point range. 15 points, gives you 36% from distance. I do think that Mississippi State is going to have a little bit of a tough time there. And for Tennessee, they do a better job of being able to maintain the ball. Both of these teams rank right around 90th to 100th in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So they're good, not great with that regard. But Mississippi State, they do shoot themselves in the foot a little bit more, nearly 13 turnovers per contest. Tennessee, more like 10.5 turnovers per game, with Zakai Ziegler being able to chip in there. Those 5 assists per contest has really been able to elevate with that regard. Josiah Jordan James is also just a stat sheet sufferer. 11 points, 7 boards, seal and a half per contest. And for Mississippi State, this has been a team that they themselves have had their ups and downs with regards to their offense, but the defense has remained constant for them. They've given up 68 points or fewer in all but 2 of their games thus far this season. It is a Tennessee team that, though they've been scoring quite a bit, this team has really been able to buckle down with their defense as well. After they gave up the 60-point first half against North Carolina, was really a wake-up call for them, as they have now given up 70 points or fewer in 6 out of their last 7 games and each of their last 5. I think that this is going to be a slow-moving defensive slog. Both of these teams relatively mid-tempo. You got Mississippi State right around about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Tennessee 155th. But with both of these teams playing as superb of defense as they are, I do think that you get yourself another nice under between these two. So my DK Network write-up is on the under. I set my total at a 133. And with Tennessee, I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Set them as a 3-point favorite. So willing to lay the deuce. 699, 700 on the betting board. UMass plays host to LaSalle. And LaSalle is exploring a cover as a underdog of 10 to 10.5 points total on this game, is between 153.5 and 154.5. And with LaSalle, I did set them as an underdog of 8 points, so I'm going to be willing to take these points. And I really do like what I'm seeing out of this UMass team, especially down low. You've got a nice 2-headed monster in Matt Cross along with Josh Cohn, who have been able to combine for about 14.5 to 15 rebounds per game. Cross has been your main scorer with about 16.5 points per game, and that has led to UMass being a top 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of percentage of missed shots that do result in an offensive rebound. This is a UMass team that is also a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I do think that LaSalle is going to be able to match up well because they've done a nice job being able to value the ball. Only about 9.9 turnovers per game. This is a Fran Dunphy coach team, so you know that they're going to be smart. And now you've got Jamari Breakus along with Andres Marrero, who have both been able to shoot it well from three-point range. They're both shooting between about 43 to 44% from distance. With Marrero, he's been able to give you about 8 points per contest. With Breakus, he's a little bit of a do-it-all guy. 5 assists, 14.5 points, 1.8 steals per game. Now, LaSalle is going to get smoked down low. You've got Deshaun Shepard, who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, and Raucus Josias has been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Other than that, you really don't have guys to be able to match up down low with this UMass team. But with this LaSalle team, they've been able to do an okay job defensively. I'm not saying that they're amazing or anything like that, but they go up against a UMass team that's only shooting right about 32% from three-point range. Shul Diggins to be able to give you about 11.5 points. Shoots it okay from three-point range. For LaSalle, with regards to their three-point shooting defense, has really been the main kryptonite of the team at 284th. But on the road, they only allow opponents to shoot about 33% from three. It's really been at home where they allow opponents to shoot 38% from the outside. So I do think that they're going to be fine from the perimeter. It's a UMass team that they rank in the top 95 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage as well. So it's a very interesting ordeal. As you've got a LaSalle team that's been looking to crank up the tempo a little bit more. UMass, they're running it, they're gunning it, they're forcing a lot of turnovers. They've really been able to push teams really outside of their comfort level level a little bit. So I did set my total at 154. Right now we're seeing a lot of 153.5, and I would be willing to take a look at the over, especially with the way that LaSalle is able to value the ball. It is a LaSalle team that has been acting up with their defense against Division I competition. This team has now given up at least 70 points in each of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, you do have a UMass team that they had that 64-60 game against Dayton, which was very much slowed down prior to that 79-plus points in each of their previous 4 games. So I do think that things are going to crank up a little bit more with regards to their offense. So you're at a 153.5 or less. Looking at the over and bull and take double figures with LaSalle. Set them as an underdog of 8. 7-1, 7-2 on the betting board. It is Louisville, and they hit the road. They're facing off against Miami. Miami is a 15.5 to a 16-point favorite. Your total on this game is anywhere between 157.5 and 158, and with this Louisville team, I did set them as an underdog of 17.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Miami. Do recognize that this is a Miami defense that certainly has left a little bit of something to be desired in recent years, but I've actually liked what I've seen a little bit more out of them recently, as they do a really good job of defending bad teams. When they see these step-up games, it's not necessarily so great, but Miami has some of the more demonstrative home and road splits on defense that you're going to find in all of college basketball. They're giving up 26 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are at home rather than when they are on the road. And for Louisville, this team, whether they're at home, whether they're on the road, whether they're on planet Pluto, they have not been very good to say the least. They're about 240th in the country with this regard. It is a Louisville team that as a collective, they are also shooting less than 30% from three-point range. And Miami has really guarded the three-point arc really well. Louisville's lone hope of being able to hold in this game is having Brandon Huntley Hatfield really control things down low, 9 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, but he, other than Trey White, and also you've been able to have Mikey James be able to combine for with White about 12 rebounds per game. They've been able to do a relatively solid job, but I mean, past what you're getting out of these guys and Sky Clark with his 15 points per contest, you have no depth whatsoever. You've got a Louisville team that turns the ball over 12.5 times per contest. They do a very poor job of being able to generate turnovers. So Miami, a team that has been turning the ball over right around about 13 times per contest, they should be able to get a lot of clean possessions. Now, you've got a few injuries for Miami. I know that Nigel Pack has been dealing with injuries, but should be good to go. Hugo Poplar has been dealing with a few ailments as well, so wouldn't be overly shocked if he misses this game, as well as Poplar has been able to shoot about 50% from three-point range. But even without him, I do think that No Chad Omier going to be able to take the fight to Brandon Huntley Hatfield, 18 points, 10 boards per contest. It's a Miami team that has been able to shoot overall 42% from three-point range, and despite the ailments that Miami has been dealing with, as they were without Poplar in each of the last 2 games, they still got to 80+ in each of those 2 games. Now, for Miami, once again, step up in competition against Clemson and Wake Forest, gave up 80+ in both of those games, but got a Louisville team that they've really been held down when they've been playing against better competition as well. This team has scored 70 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 5 games. I do think that Miami is going to be able to do a very solid job with their defense in this one, and I do think that with Miami, despite the fact that they might be without Poplar, they still have enough out of their backcourt to be able to get it done, especially with Pack. Pack can get in with north of 4 assists per contest against a Louisville team that just feels dysfunctional and sad once again. So I did set my line at 17.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Miami, and did set my total 153.5. This Miami team has been pretty solid defensively against lesser competition. So diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Miami. 7-3, 7-4 on the betting board. It is Virginia Tech playing us at Clemson. Clemson, a 1 to 2 point road favor. Your total is between 144.5 and 145, and with this Clemson bunch, I did set them as a 2-point favorite. Once we've seen 1.5, I'm going to be willing to lay that small number. It's a Virginia Tech team that is just not the same offensively as they have been in past years. Now, Virginia Tech also a little bit better defensively as well, as Virginia Tech really fell off the face of planet Earth with their defense last season, and I'm not saying that there's some sort of a steel curtain on defense or anything like that, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it's been coming back a little bit, with ranking 86th in the country for Virginia Tech. Whole heck of a lot better at home rather than on the road with regards to their defense, as they are giving up nearly 25 points per 100 possessions fewer at home rather than on the road. And Lynn Kidd has been tremendous down low, 15 points, 7.5 rebounds per game for a bunch of. They're shooting about 34.5% from three-point. Sean Padula continues to give you north of 4.5 assists, of fewer than 2.5 turnovers per game. Shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range, and it's really been all about Hunter Couture and him being able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, packing in their double figures as well. On Virginia Tech, defensively, they do rank in the top 100 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. This is a Clemson team that they themselves are outside the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Clemson, they do an okay job of guarding the arc. Nothing great, nothing terrible. Right around about 148th with this regard, but you got someone named PJ Hall who just completely dominates games. At 6'10", shoots north of 40% from three-point range, 20+ points, 6+ rebounds per game, and then you've got Chase Hunter, who's able to give you about 13+ points per contest. For Clemson, they play at a little bit of a slower tempo, so that allows them to stay in control, turn the ball over fewer than 11 times per contest. They're shooting darn near 40% from three-point range. We've seen that cool down just a little bit recently, but still have been able to do a pretty solid job with that regard. And Clemson has done a nice job of being able to control the glass as well. A team that ranks 62nd in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate for Virginia Tech, really, other than what you're getting out of Kidd. It's been a little bit touch and go. They're about 81st in the country with this regard, as you've got Mr. Poteet down low, who's been able to give you a few points. He's able to chip in there a board or two with regards to the blocks for about 2.5 rebounds as a whole, but you just don't have a lot of rebounding outside of Kidd. They're a very one-dimensional team. Meanwhile, it's Clemson, though the defense can sometimes be a little bit suspect with Joe Girard. He shoots 43.5% from three, 15 points. It is a Clemson team that's not generating a lot of turnovers, but they're doing a very good job playing efficient offense, and both of these teams are relatively low tempo. So I did set Clemson as a favorite of 2. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 1.5 with them. I did set my total at 144. I just think that with a lack of possessions and with the way that Virginia Tech has been a little bit diminished on offense, but a little bit better on defense, that's going to call for a little bit of a lower scoring game. So did take a look at the under, and with Clemson, wanted to lay up to 1.5 with them. 705, 706 on the betting board. It is Wofford, and they play us at Mercer, and Mercer does find themselves as underdogs of 4.5 points. Totals between 145.5 and 146, and with Wofford, I did set them as a favorite of 6 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. If you look at the overall season results for Wofford, this team is outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's been horrible, but they've been able to rise up a little bit more in terms of this defense. As if you take a look at regulation, because their game against VMI, that went to overtime. So if you throw that one out of the fold, this team has now given up 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games that have wrapped up in regulation. They've been able to get quite a bit out of their backcourt, as you've got Dylan Bailey, coupled with Corey Tripp, who've been able to do a nice job combining for in that neighborhood about 29.8 points per contest. For Wofford, they shoot about 35% from three-point range. They get to go up against a Mercer team that has had all sorts of doldrums with regards to their offense. Jalen McCreary has been able to give you about 15 points, 5 rebounds per contest, but this is a Mercer team that really outside of McCreary, you're not getting a ton down low. They lost someone like a David Craig, who had a lot of size in the offseason, so that's caused them to be outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, Kyler Filewich has been able to give this Wofford team in that pocket about 9 rebounds per game. Not a guy that's going to stretch the floor, hit threes or anything like that, but Wofford has been able to ascend into the top 110 with regards to overall rebound rate, and the key for this Wofford team is just being able to stay disciplined and be able to guard the three-point arc, as Wofford has had all sorts of issues the last few years with regards to perimeter defense. They're 302nd in the country with this regard, but allowing opponents to shoot just 32.4% from distance at home compared to 36.5% on the road, and this is a Mercer squad that they themselves are allowing opponents to shoot from three-point range in that neighborhood of about 34.7%, including 35% on the road. That is about 250th in all of college basketball with this Mercer team. They have yet to really find their rhythm with regards to a true point guard as well, whereas Wofford does have that with Corey Tripp being able to give you about 3.5 assists per contest. When it comes to Mercer, you've had Anthony Bernard, who's been able to chip in there about 2.8, 2.9 assists per contest, but for this Mercer team as well, you have to fear free throw shooting being a reason why the team might not cover as well. In a tighter spread like this, the fact that they shoot just 64.6% at the free throw line, and the fact that out of their top 6 scorers, just one guy shoots about 72.3%, that has to be very concerning. They would deal with a little bit of an injury to David Thomas as well. Should be good to go in this one, and has been able to supply double figures in 3 of the last 4 games, but that's a little bit of a concern as well. I do think that Wofford going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low. I like what I've seen defensively from this team recently as well, though I did set my total at 148 because you got a Mercer team that they themselves have popped off with their offense, 74 plus points in 4 out of their last 5 games. Defensively, they've been giving it up a little bit as well, 75 plus in 2 out of their last 4 games, so going to be taking a look at the over, and with Wofford, a team that's on the top 75 with regards to possessions per game, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 with them. 707, 708 on the betting board. Sam Houston State plays us with Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky does find themselves in a pick'em game / as a 1 to 1.5 point underdog. Total on this game, you're going to be finding it anywhere between 152 and 152.5. Did set Western Kentucky as a 2.5 point favorite. Going to be willing to ride with them outright on the money line. It is a Western Kentucky team that has really cranked up their tempo. A top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game. Biggest bugaboo for Western Kentucky has been the outside shooting. The team is collective. They shoot about 30.5% from three-point range, but your top 2 scorers, Christian Lander, Don McHenry, they've been able to combine to shoot about 35.5% from three-point range. McHenry is the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 10 points per game, 15 points. He and Lander have been able to combine for about 5 assists per contest, so 13.5 turnovers per game. It's bad, but it's not as bad when you consider the fact that Western Kentucky is a team that plays very much up-tempo, and for Western Kentucky, for the doldrums that they do have with their own three-point shooting, they hold you down from the perimeter as well. They are 11th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, going up against the Sam Houston State team that doesn't necessarily have supreme rebounding as well. This is the Sam Houston State team that they lose quite a few pieces from a season ago, including their coach and Jason Newton, but they maintain the same style. They've got a lot of interchangeable pieces, making hockey-style line changes, but for Sam Houston State, they're now right around about 142nd in the country with regards to opponent's three-point shooting percentage. And last year, Sam Houston State was a team that could really bomb it from three-point range. This season, they're more around 193rd in the country with this regard. With Sam Houston State, you do have someone in Jaden Ray who's been able to do a nice job dishing out the ball, 4.5 assists per game, but he's now started to turn the ball over a little bit as well. Sam Houston State did have a little bit of an issue with regards to turnovers a season ago that has manifested into 13.3 per contest thus far this season. Davon Bards, along with Lamar Wilkins, have been able to combine for 28 points per game. Nobody outside of that really gives you north of 8 points per game. You've had a few guys be able to do a relatively solid job down low, like Damon Nicholas, being able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, so that battle on the glass is going to be very intriguing as you've got a Western Kentucky team that doesn't necessarily do a supreme job there. When it comes to Western Kentucky, though, they do just enough to be able to find a way to be able to get efficient shots, be able to get a few second and third chances, as well as Western Kentucky, about 118th in the country with regards to rebound rate, going up against the Sam Houston State team that's diminished you about 233rd with this regard. I do think that Western Kentucky goes on the road, gets the job done, especially with Sam Houston State having a 45.8% rebound rate at home. They've actually been rebounding better on the road. This team is outside the top 275 with regards to home rebound rate, and I do think that that's going to be a big difference maker. Looking at Western Kentucky, all right, on the money line, set them as a 2.5 point favorite, and did somebody total at 152.5 with Sam Houston State also now cranking up their tempo. They're diminished on defense, and they're a team that is also in the top 150 with regards to total possessions per game. After that was more like 300th a season ago. So looking at the 152 over at Western Kentucky on the money line, 709, 710 on the betting board. Belmont plays those to Illinois State. Illinois State does find themselves as a 6.5 to a 7-point underdog. Your totals between 148.5 and 149, and with Illinois State, did set them as an underdog of 9 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's a Belmont team that has certainly been having their issues defensively. The team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis outside the top 250, but Malik Dia all of a sudden has been able to emerge for the team. He's giving you 6+ rebounds per game, 17+ points, shooting high at 30s from 3-point range at 6'9" as Kate Tyson gives you 17 points, 5+ boards. He's also shooting it well from 3. Now, Belmont needs to clean things up on the glass. We're in 75th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Other than Tyson along Dia, you really don't have a whole heck of a lot there. Meanwhile, for Illinois State, Brandon Leib is someone that comes in from Illinois, a true 7-footer that's only giving you right around about 4 to 5 rebounds per game. And for Illinois State, they are 89th in the country with regards to rebound rate. It's been a whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of approach there, but they're shooting below 32% from 3-point range. It's an Illinois State team that, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they honestly haven't been too bad with this respect, as they're ranking right around about 182nd with this regard, but we are seeing things really going to mush for this team. Over their last 3 games, they're giving out 25 more points per 100 possessions than they have for the entirety of the season. It feels like it was a little bit of fool's gold to begin the season with this Illinois State team, as they have now given up at least 70 points in each of their last 3 games, and for that matter, they have given up north of 88 points in 2 of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, the offense has not gotten going, 71 points of fear in each of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Belmont team that they've been able to elevate on defense. 73 points of fear surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games, and for Illinois State, who's going to be the answer on offense for a team that is turning the ball over north of 12 times per contest? You really don't have much outside of Dalton Banks in terms of facilitation, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, 10.5 points per game, but you don't have that go-to scorer on this team. Darius Burford has been able to give you about 13 points per contest, but I've got my question marks there. And what has been key for Belmont is that Keyshawn Davidson has been a little bit out of sorts to begin the season, but has really found his niche as a little bit more of a passer and a facilitator. He is now in the last 5 games, but averaging more like 3.5 assists per contest, all while turning the ball over only about 1.6 times per game, keeping things efficient for a Belmont team that certainly is able to stroke it from 3-point range. With this Belmont team, they've gotten to at least 74 points in 4 of their last 5 games, and I do think that they take it to an Illinois State team that's starting to really diminish defensively. I did somebody total 149, attributing the fact that Illinois State has been a little bit more rough on defense recently, so looking at the over, and with Belmont, going to be willing to lay the number, made them a 9-point favorite. 7-11, 7-12 on the betting board, but Riley plays us at Evansville, and Evansville does find themselves as an underdog of 11.5 to 12 points. Your total on this game is 144.5. With Evansville, I did set them as an underdog of 8 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. I feel like this Bradley team is just a little bit overvalued in general. Bradley really had success last season by being a stout, hard-nosed defense, and I think that they're really missing Rick Bass down low. They are right now 103rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I feel like this Evansville team is just hiding in plain sight right now. Evansville has ascended to being a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Usain Toomey has really been able to elevate this team down low, giving you about 6 rebounds per game, and Ben Humor-Riches shoots north of 40% from 3, 16 plus points per contest for an Evansville team that was in the toilet bowl with their offense last season. They were one of the most deplorable offenses in all of college basketball back under the old regime of Marty Simmons, as a matter of fact, for Evansville. Currently, this season, they are averaging 14.5 more points per 100 possessions than they did a season ago. They're up to the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and I think that they're going to be able to keep it going. Kenny Strawbridge has been able to do a relatively solid job, giving the team right around about 3.5, 4 boards per contest. It's a Bradley team that they turn the ball over north of 12.5 times per contest. They've been dealing with injuries to Connor Hickman, though he should be good to go in this one. You do have someone in Malevi Leons who's been able to give you about 13 points, 7 to 8 rebounds per game at 6'9". He's able to pop threes, but he doesn't necessarily shoot them very well, as from three-point range, he's shooting less than 30% from distance, and it's not like Bradley is necessarily decimating on the glass. 163rd with that regard. Evansville do recognize that they're at 210, so they need a little bit more than Mr. Toomey being able to guard things down low, but that said, this is also an Evansville team that has been able to do a little bit better job of being able to generate some turnovers, a little bit vulnerable from the outside, allowing opponents to shoot 34.5% from three-point range in a road/shoot-record environment, going up against the Bradley team that's more around 85th with this regard, but they allow opponents to shoot 34% from 3 at home. They've actually been much better on the road rather than out there in the great state of Illinois, and I do think that Evansville goes in there, they're able to hold in this game, do a relatively solid job taking care of the ball for Evansville. Certainly has been a little bit rough for them on defense recently, 76 plus points surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games, but this is a Bradley team that they themselves always have their question marks with regards to their offense. Offensively, they've now gone on to a run where they've given up 64 points of fear each of their last 4 games, but one of those was against a non-D1 school. They played against SIU Edwardsville, Valparaiso, Missouri State, so I do think that rubber is going to beat the road here, and Evansville holds in this game. Set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Evansville, and did make my total at a 142, as Bradley still a relatively low-tempo team. At Evansville, they've been able to do a little bit more defensively this year than in past years as well. So diving in on the under and taking the points with Evansville. 7-13, 7-14 on the betting board. It is Drake playing us to Indiana State. Indiana State does find themselves in a pick'em game as a 1-point underdog with your total 158.5. Set Drake as a 1.5 point favorite. I really like both of these teams, but I do think that the home court advantage is going to be the difference maker here. So I'm going to be willing to take Drake on this pick'em line. For Indiana State, credit where credit is due. The defense is starting to look a little bit better for the team. 73 points or fewer given up in 4 out of their last 5 games. Doesn't sound like much, but when you've got a high-powered Indiana State team that is in the top 50 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, all you need is that to be able to ascend. And Indiana State, they were a top 80 team nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. They're about 106th this season. The big issue that you do have with Indiana State, though, they're giving up 26.2 points more per 100 possessions in a road/shoot-record environment rather than at home. This is a Drake team that they have relatively similar numbers as well. 110th of the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They give up about 14.7 points more per 100 possessions when they hit the road. So home cooking, I do think is going to be big for a Drake team that they've been looking to the coach's son, Tucker DeVries, to do it all. 4 assists, 6 boards, 19 points per game, and he does get a little bit of help down low from Darnell Brody, who's been able to do a solid job being able to give you 8 rebounds per game. Now, Brody's going to have his hands full because you have to go up against Robbie Avila, someone who's saying 6'10". He's been really a unicorn of college basketball this season, 13 plus points. He's able to pop it from 3 as Indiana State. They've got darn near everyone on the roster shooting 40+% from 3-point range. As a matter of fact, you look at Indiana State, they are 4th in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage and number 4 in terms of 3-point shooting percentage in a road/shoot-record environment, shooting 41.9% from 3-point range. I do though think that Drake is going to be able to do a solid job of being able to contain this. You've got someone like an Aiden Wright who's been shooting in the high 30s from 3-point range, but elevates his team defensively after coming in from CSUN. You've got someone like Cooper Enright who shot it well from 3, but is also a really nice standout defensively as well. Now with Drake, it's been vastly different home to road road for them as well, as overall, with regards to the three-point shooting percentage, 260th in the country, but allowing opponents to shoot 39.1% from three-point range away from home, 29.9% from three-point range at home. And for Indiana State, they allow opponents to shoot 36.2% from three-point range away from home, 20.5% at home. I do think that the home and road splits are very big in this game. I like both of these teams moving forward. I think that both of these teams are dangerous, but I like Drake being able to get the job done at home. Set this line at 1.5, so I'm going to be taking them on this pick'em line / as a 1-point favorite. And did set my total at 157.5. I do think that Indiana State could have cooled down a little bit with that three-point shooting, so looking under and going to be willing to take Drake on this pick'em line. 7:15, 7:16 on the betting board. UIC, Illinois, Chicago. It's the road facing off against Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa does find themselves as a favorite of 7.5 to 8 points. And your total on this game, you're going to be getting it anywhere between 139.5 and 140. And I did set UIC as an underdog of 4 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Northern Iowa. I just failed to really see what this team does well. They're outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do a relatively solid job with their three-point shooting. I will give them that, but with this Northern Iowa team, it's been very suspect with them down low, as Titan Anderson has been able to give you about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game, and it's a Northern Iowa team that has really been able to thrive thanks to three-point shooting, as you've got Bowen Bourne, who got off to a really rough start to begin the season, but if you look really since Thanksgiving, he's been averaging north of 15 points per contest, shooting well above 35% from three-point range, so he's been able to get things sorted out there, as Nathan Heisey has really been your main guy, about 15 to 16 points per contest for a Northern Iowa team that, in their own right, they've been a very good three-point shooting team overall for the season, about 114th in the country, about 35% three-point shooting overall, but you don't have to go up against a UIC team that ranks in the top 25 nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and a team that ranks in the top 10 nationally in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, going up against a Northern Iowa team that they just really don't do a lot great on defense. They're about 248th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and that has been a big kryptonite for this UIC team. UIC turning the ball over right around about 13 times per contest. You've got someone that I really do like in Toby Okani, who's been able to do a solid job being able to chip in there about 7 to 8 rebounds, 12 plus points at 6'8". He's bearing about 40% of his threes. And then Isaiah Rivera, how big has he been coming over from Colorado State? He's the guy that shoots north of 40% from the outside, chipping in there about 15.5 or so points per contest. You've been able to get a little bit more out of CJ Jones with his 5 assists per game. That's helped the UIC Flames be able to cut down on the turnovers. And with the UIC, if you do have a little bit of an issue with this team, it is the fact that they are turning the ball over about 12 times per game, but as well, you've also got the free throw shooting percentage hovering in that neighborhood about 65%, but with them being the underdog, you have much less trepidation with them, rather than if you were laying points, where if you were having them go to the free throw line late, needing to be able to cover that game. You're not going to be fighting that in this situation with UIC, a UIC team that has been able to do quite a good job of being able to shoot from three-point range himself. So I do think that UIC is going to be able to hold in this game. Set my line at 4. I feel like Northern Iowa is very overvalued in the market, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. And with UIC being as good as they have been on defense, I think that they lock it down once again. So I did set my total at a 138, diving in on the under and taking the points with UIC. 7-17, 7-18 on the betting board. It is Murray State, and they're going to be on the road. They're going to be facing off against Missouri State, and Missouri State does find themselves as a favorite of anywhere between 4 to 4.5 points total on this game, anywhere between 145 and 145.5. This is a line that I set at 8. I'm going to be willing to lay with Missouri State. Missouri State has cranked up their tempo a little bit more. Last year, they were about a 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. They're in the top half of college basketball this season, but in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they've actually been a little bit better this season, as they're up to the top 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up about 10.8 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road. And for Murray State, they play slowly. This team is actually outside of the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game, but they are 247th at all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, for Murray State, defense has improved a little bit more. They have given up 73 points for fewer in each of their last 3 games, all while being able to get to at least 75 points in each of their last 3. It's a small sample size, so going up against a Missouri State team that they themselves have had a little bit of a tough time getting it going offensively. This is a squad that has now scored 72 points or fewer in 5 out of their last 6 games, but you do have Alston Mason, who's to be able to give you about 17 points, 3.5 assists per game for a Missouri State team that the biggest issue that you do have with them, the 13 turnovers per contest. They've actually really improved their free throw shooting after last season. It was just pretty deplorable. You've got NJ Benson, who's been able to give you about 7 boards per contest, and this team should be able to win that battle down low with having Chance Moore along Donovan Clay be able to combine for about 11.5 rebounds per game. Clay chips in there 12 plus points, has been able to bomb it from 3-point range, gives you about 3 plus assists per contest as well. And they go up against a Murray State team that has Nick Ellingson, who's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game coming in from Eastern Illinois. But it's really all about what you're able to get out of Jacoby Wood along with Rob Perry, who've been able to combine for about 26 points per contest. Perry, a high 33-point shooter, but it is a Murray State team that I fear that they're going to have a bit of a tough time down low. Murray State 224th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Not to say that this Missouri State team is necessarily batting down the hatches, but they're 60th in the country. They've been able to do a really nice job of mixing and matching on that front. This is a Murray State team that I think is going to be leaving themselves very vulnerable to giving up a lot of 3-point shots. And for Murray State, they're a team that they play slowly. They don't do necessarily a great job defensively. They don't do a great job on the glass, and they themselves allow opponents to shoot from 3-point range 36.5%. That is 315th in all of college basketball. Just not a great combination right there. Did set my total at a 142 with the way that Missouri State still plays very slowly, and I do think that you're going to see a very small amount of possessions in this game, and Murray State just is going to get locked down by a very good Missouri State defense. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7.5 points with Missouri State. 719, 720 on the betting board. It is Valparaiso playing us to Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois just find themselves as road favorites of 10.5 points. Total on this game is between 133 and 133.5. I did said Southern Illinois is an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Valparaiso. Just nothing is going right for this team. Valparaiso is certainly giving it up from 3-point range as they're about 204th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and now they're going up against a Southern Illinois team that's going to stick them in the mud. They're back outside the top 310 in terms of total possessions per game. Southern Illinois is really starting to bear down defensively, top 70 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for the Southern Illinois team, they've got a top 5 scorer in all of college basketball that's absolutely going to light them up in Xavier Johnson, who has been absolutely tremendous. Xavier Johnson is right now contributing between 24 and 25 points per contest. He's been able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range, and he's getting other guys involved as well with about 6 assists, 4 rebounds per contest, as you've been able to get really good production out of Clarence Rupert, who's a part of that Elite 8 team over at St. Peter's, 6 boards, 9 points per contest. Jared Hensley, he comes in as a 2-time transfer, was ineligible to begin the season. Now he gives the team some reinforcements with about 8.5 points per contest, currently shooting 60% from 3-point range, no doubt about it. I think that we're going to be seeing a little bit of a fall off there, but for Valparaiso, after Jerome Palm was doing a really nice job to begin the season down low, he has just fallen off the face of planet Earth. I have no idea why. You do still have Darius Stiviero, who's done a nice job building out the ball. He's giving you about 5 assists and 2 turnovers per game, so no complaints there. But for Valparaiso, 303rd in the country in terms of overall rebound rate, going up against a Southern Illinois team that are not amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but they're right around about 188th. You'll certainly take that over north of 300th for this Valparaiso team. They just have not been able to find their sea legs with regards to both offense and on the defensive side of things. As for Valparaiso, they really don't have too much of a home court environment as well. 218th overall in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, only giving up about 3.5 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road. You've had Isaiah Stafford be able to put the team on his back, 16.5 points per contest, but he only shoots about 28.5% from 3 for a Valpo team that they shoot 39.5% from floor, 30.5% from 3-point range. Southern Illinois, who has really just been beating teams down on defense. This team has given up now 64 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. For Southern Illinois, last time they gave up north of 70 points, you have to go all the way back to the middle of November when they played against James Madison. Other than James Madison, this team I don't think has given up more than 70 points in a game since that Indiana State game as well. So I think that this is going to be a low-scoring slog. I'm going to be willing to lay with Southern Illinois, set them as an 11-point favorite. I made my total 131. So going under and laying it with the Salukis. 721, 722 on the betting board. UTSA meet for the Roadrunners. They throw to face off against Memphis. Memphis a 20 to a 21-point favorite, and your total on this game is between 161.5 and 162. Memphis should be a pretty sizable favorite. Could only set this line at 19, though. I'm going to be willing to take the points with UTSA. UTSA actually does have some relatively good size, as you've been able to get a lot of guys doing an okay job on the glass. They're going to lose that battle to Davi Jones, who's by far the best player out there on the floor. 20.5 points, 6.5 boards, shooting 36.5% 44% from three-point range, but we've noticed a little bit of slippage with that three-point shooting. Meanwhile, you've got Dre Fuller, Carlton Lingard, who have both been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game along Trey Edmonds, and throw in there the fact that Jordan Ivy Curry is a two-time transfer that's back in the fold. When he was playing at UTSA 2 seasons ago, 14 points, shot 34% from three, transferred over to Pacific, decided to transfer back, and is out due to the NCAA and all their tomfoolery, but he has scored 15-plus points in each of the last 3 games, 4-plus assists in each of the last 3. Now, a high-variance player, as in the last 3 games I was mentioning. He's also had in those games a combined 14 turnovers, and this is a Memphis team that they do a relatively solid job of being able to generate those turnovers. He's 8.7 steals per game. Memphis plays fast. I don't think they're playing quite as out of control this year as they have in past years, as for Memphis, it's still a brisk pace, but in terms of total possessions per game, they've dialed it back just a touch, hovering more in that neighborhood of about 50th in the country. Meanwhile, UTSA, this team is running it and gunning it. They are 31st in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and certainly has not been the world's most efficient defense. They are, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 264th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a Memphis team that they themselves have been a little bit all over the place, but they've been able to do a good job defensively recently. 79th in the country with this regard. You take a look at their recent results, and the team has given up 75 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. Doesn't sound like much, but when you're playing at the tempo that they are, that is actually a little bit of an accomplishment. And for Memphis, you do have Javon Quinterly, who's been able to cut down on the turnovers, had that big made 3 to be able to lift them over Tulsa. He's been able to get this team right around 4.5 assists per contest, but I do like what I'm seeing out of Christian Tucker on the flip side for UTSA as well. 13 points, a little bit over 5 assists per contest. This UTSA team, without question, they're going to lose a battle on the glass, but I think that they remain a little bit more lively than expected with Jordan Ivy Curry being able to come back in the fold as well. That helps out a UTSA team that I think they lose this game. They still lose the game by quite a bit, but I do think that Memphis has started to get a little bit overinflated. So you're at the 20 plus, going to be willing to take the points with the UTSA. I did somebody total 155 with the way that Memphis has been improving a little bit defensively. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with the UTSA. Meet me for the Roadrunners. 723, 724 on the betting board. NC State is going to be playing us in North Carolina. And the Tar Heels do find themselves as road favorites of between 4 and 4.5 points. Totals between 154 and 155.5. Set my line at 3, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with NC State. NC State has really done a nice job of not beating themselves. Only about 10.5 to 11 turnovers per contest. This is a team that's going to lose that battle down low. North Carolina, you've got Armando Bacot. He's a top 5 player with regards to rebounds per game in all of college basketball, chipping in their 15 plus points per contest. We all know what he's fully capable of, and for North Carolina, in terms of rebound rate, 64th in all of college basketball. NC State is more around 183rd, but with this NC State team, they've been able to do a nice job of having their guards all really be able to operate in space. DJ Turn It Up Horn, shooting north of 40% from three-point range. He's been able to log for the team 13 plus points per contest. We know that North Carolina is always going to have their issues defensively. They honestly haven't been horrible thus far this season, and when it comes to North Carolina, they're actually 56th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Interesting split with them allowing opponents to shoot 35.2% for three-point range at home, just 26.1% on the road, but for NC State, they've shut down the three ball at home as well, allowing opponents to shoot just 29.3% from three, and that's a big reason why this North Carolina team has been able to elevate this season. Getting out Caleb Love, who's just not shooting very well from three-point range. It feels like everyone benefited. Love has been amazing at Arizona. This North Carolina team is much more efficient with RJ Davis being able to supply 20.5 points per contest, shooting 39.5% from three. So one of those rare circumstances where everyone was able to win. And for North Carolina, what I do think that you need to see a little bit more from is guys like Seth Trimble, Jalen Washington. Just, it feels like they're a very top-heavy team. Cormac Ryan has given you 11 points per contest despite not shooting it well from three. He's been pretty rock solid, but with NC State just having the plethora of guards that they have at their disposal. I was mentioning DJ Horn, but you've also got Jaden Taylor, Casey Marcel. Both of these guys have been able to combine for about 25 points per contest. Taylor is shooting 36% from three, and NC State 8.6 turnovers per game. That is a top 5 mark in all of college basketball. I think I oversold them. I think I was mentioning 11. That's North Carolina is more around 10.5 turnovers per game, but Michael O'Connell, even though he doesn't really give you a lot of scoring, he does a nice job being able to distribute, and if you can get a little bit more out of MJ Rice, it's going to lead to this NC State team being all the more dangerous. And I did say I told 161, even though North Carolina has looked a bit better defensively recently. They've actually given up fewer than 70 points in each of their last 4 games. I do think that that's going to be coming to an end, and you've got an NC State team that has been able to elevate their offense with north of 75 points in 3 of their last 4 games, with 2 of those games being against Virginia and Notre Dame. So they've really been able to do it against low teams. So I'm going to be looking at the over and going to be taking a look at the points with NC State set them as a 3-point dog. 725, 726 on the betting board. It is Wisconsin on the road facing off against Ohio State. The Ohio State University does find themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point home favorite. Your total is between 140.5 and 141.5. Did set my total at a 141. Personally, I would rather have the 141.5 under rather than the 140.5 over. You've got a Wisconsin team that they just still are a bottom 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, and with Wisconsin, even though the offense has been much more prolific this year. They're a top 45 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You know that the bottom can fall out at any time on this Wisconsin team and that they are still going to play very under control. 10 turnovers per game, so they've done a good job locking down there. They're shooting about 34% from three-point range. And for Wisconsin, they do see a little bit of drop-off in terms of both their offense and their defense away from home, but you have Stephen Krull, Tyler Wall, who should be able to do a solid job down low. These two guys combined for about 13.7 rebounds per game, going up against an Ohio State team that they themselves do a nice job on the glass. Roddy Gale is a little bit of a versatile do-it-all player. 3 assists, 14.5 points, 5.5 boards, shooting 35.5% from three-point range. And then Felix Opara, coupled with Zed Key, have been able to combine for about 12.5 rebounds per game. Opara is actually giving you north of 2 blocks per contest, and then Bruce Thornton has really been your main man, shooting for about 16 points per game, high 30s from three-point range, giving out north of 4 assists per contest as well. So going to be really interesting to see how Wisconsin is able to match up on the glass, because outside of Wall along with Stephen Krull, they don't necessarily have a ton down low, but they've really been able to improve their rebounding this year. They're a top 35 team in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Ohio State has been able to do a good job plowing on the glass as well. They're 26th in all of college basketball, and this is really going to come down to which team is able to guard the arc a little bit better. It is a Wisconsin team that has got John Blackwell shooting north of 40% from three-point range, but I do think that there's going to be an inevitable regression there, and for this Wisconsin team, they are just 283rd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, allowing opponents to shoot 41% from distance. But if you look at the teams that they have played away from home, I'm looking at the likes of Arizona and company, it has really been a rough and tumble schedule. Meanwhile, you've got an Ohio State team that's 81st in all of college basketball, but I do think that the numbers are going to start to reverse course a little bit. That said, even with Wisconsin getting a little bit more fortunate on that three-point shooting defense, I still think that Ohio State is going to do a solid job down low with Bruce Thornton doing such a good job running this Ohio State offense. I do think that they get the job done at home. Set my line at 3, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 1.5 points. I did set my total at 141, so you're at the 141.5, looking under, and willing to lay the small number with the Ohio State University. 727, 728 on the betting board. The men of Troy play also Louisiana. Louisiana does find themselves as an underdog of 1.5 to 2 points. So the last game is 146.5, and with Louisiana, I did set them as an underdog of 2 points. So here at the 1.5, I'm going to be willing to lay with Troy. With Troy, this team has been able to do a relatively solid job of just staying even keel and getting the most out of their backcourt, as Christian Eugene has been the main man to be able to dole out the ball, 15 points, right around 4 assists per contest. They go up against a Louisiana team that also has a good point guard of their own, famous folks, 4.5 assists, 10.5 points per game. It's not shooting it well from 3, but Louisiana as a whole, they're shooting about 37% from the outside. It's a Louisiana team that has been looking to win from the perimeter as for the third straight year. You've got someone in Kentrell Garnett shooting north of 40% from three-point range. He's been about a 9 to a 10 point per game scorer, so love what I'm seeing there for Louisiana. They are 45th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Misleading stat, though. They're allowing opponents to shoot 19.7% from three-point range at home. That balloons to 35% in a road/neutral court environment. So take a lot of caution there with a Louisiana team that they themselves have had a little bit of a tough time on the glass as well. They're 297th in the country in terms of overall rebound rate, and it's not to say that the men of Troy are doing an absolutely amazing job batting down the hatches on the glass, but this team does rank in the top 100 with that regard. It's a Troy team that they don't necessarily have an amazing amount of guys down low. Joe Charles is probably going to be the best overall rebounder in this game. He plays for Louisiana, 11 points, about 10 boards, shooting 35% from three-point range, but that said, for Troy, you've been able to have Thomas Stout do a nice job of being able to headline things with about 5.5 rebounds per game, and it is a team where the whole is really greater than the sum of its parts. You've got Eugene, was a little bit of a floor general for the team, but you've got pretty much 5 separate guys that give you at least 3.8 rebounds per game. Along with Eugene, you've been able to get 47.5% three-point shooting out of Keaton Conway, who's been able to chip in there about 11 points per game. Amir Muhammad has been able to give you about 10.5 points per game. This is a Troy team that you're able to feel secure about them late in games as well. Their top 4 scorers, 3 of them, shoot north of 82% at the free throw line. So with Troy, I did set them as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them in the spot. It's a Louisiana team that is a mid-tempo team, but a team that certainly has been giving up their their fair share of points, giving up 74 plus in 3 of their last 5 games. The men of Troy, they've been able to ascend with their offense north of 72 points in 2 out of their last 4 games, at 85 plus in 2 out of their last 4 as well. So going to be taking a look at the over, set my total 154 and willing to lay up to 1.5 with Troy. 729, 730 on the betting board. Xavier is going to be playing us to UConn. UConn just find themselves as a road favorite of 4 to 4.5 points. Totals between 145.5 and 146.5. Have to assume that Donovan Clingan is going to be out until further notice, so that is attributed for in this spot. But that said, with UConn, still willing to lay up to 7.5 with them. I just feel like the Xavier team is just not quite what we saw a season ago. Now, credit where credit is due. This is a Xavier bunch that honestly has been able to do a little bit of a better job defensively than a year ago, but you just take a look at the offense and it's not the same. 187th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for this UConn team, they have been doing it all. Number 3 in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, credit where credit is due. Xavier is actually giving up right around 6.5 points fewer per 100 possessions this season than they did a season ago, but I just don't know how they matched up in the backcourt with Tristan Newton along Cam Spencer. Both of these guys give you 15.1 points and 1.3 steals per contest. Newton more of the triple-double machine, 6.5 boards, 5.5 assists, while Spencer is more of your deep shooter, shooting 44.3% from three-point range for a UConn team that they only turn the ball over 10.5 times per game. And even though you've got out of the fold Mr. Donovan Clingan, you still have Alex Karaban, who's been able to give you north of 6 rebounds per game, and Abdul Usman, he's been able to do a relatively solid job down low for this Xavier team. Comes in from North Texas, the old mean green, and he's been able to do a nice job being able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, gives you north of a block per contest, and it is a Xavier team that shoots it much better at home rather than on the road. 36.2% three-point shooting team at home, sub 29% when they are on the road, and this is a UConn team that they themselves typically do a little bit of a better job at home rather than on the road as well. For UConn, they're shooting about 35% from 3 at home, or like 33% on the road, but even with Clingan being out of the fold, I do think that this UConn team is really going to take the fight to Xavier. It is a Xavier team that I still have my question marks outside of Usman. You've been able to get quite a bit of production out of Quincy Oliveri along with Desmond Claude. They've been able to combine for in that neighborhood about 32.5 points per contest. Oliveri shooting about 41% from three-point range, but Xavier, they're right around about 100th in the country in terms of overall rebound rate. And for UConn, this team has been one of the best teams in all of college basketball at being able to hit the glass each of the last 2 seasons. They're number 6 in all of college basketball right now, but if you look at the last 3 games without Donovan Clingan, they've still been a top 40 team in terms of rebound rate. So I do think that UConn goes on the road and they're able to get the job done. Set my line at a 7.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. For the Xavier team, they've had to slow down a little bit. They've been less efficient on offense, and UConn, a team that is outside the top 240 in terms of total possessions per game. So I did set my total more around about a 143.5, looking at the under and willing to lay with UConn. 731, 732 on the betting board. Butler, it's a road face-off against Marquette, and Marquette does find themselves as 10.5 to 11.5 point favorites. Total on this game are between 153 and 154. With Marquette, I did set them as a favorite of 12 points. Here at the 10.5 to an 11, I'm going to be willing to lay the number with this Butler bunch. They certainly have been able to do a much better job with their offense than they did a season ago, because Pasha Alexander just getting away from Andre Curbelo, I feel like has been very good for him. Assist to turnover ratio of 2 steals per game. Never shoots it well from three-point range, but has been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest. But now he has to go up against a Marquette team that's really checking all the boxes with Tyler Kolek, giving you 14.5 points, 6.5 assists, 1.7 steals, 5 boards on 41+% three-point shooting. This Marquette team has just become so prolific with that regard, and this is a Marquette defense that truly is quite a bit different when they're at home rather than on the road. Marquette, they are 39th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're giving up 13.8 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than in a roadside-neutral court environment. And when it comes to this Butler team, they themselves take a little bit of a dive when they're on the road, as this team is giving up about 17.8 points more per 100 possessions in a roadside-neutral court environment rather than at home. And the big question that we have with Marquette coming into the season is the rebound rate, because this Marquette team last season, they were a bottom 75 team with regards to rebound rate, and it's still not great, but at home, they've got a rebound percentage of 52.2%, and also Ogunera is to thank for that. Only guy in the roster giving you north of 5.2 rebounds per game, 13.5 points, 7 boards per contest, and we go up against a Butler team that does have a 7-footer that comes in from Bucknell and Andre 3000 Screen, who's been rock solid, but it's not like this Butler team has been amazing on the glass. 167th with that regard. Jalen Thomas is able to give you a little bit north of 6 rebounds per game, so that Achilles heel is not going to be unearthed. Butler shooting it much better from three-point range, shooting 35% as a collective, as Pierre Brooks to be able to give you 16.5 points. He's shooting about 38.5% from 3. DJ Turn It Up Davis is shooting 40% for 3, as he and Jamal Telford have been able to combine for about 25 points per contest. But this is also a Butler team that they have been a little bit suspect with regards to just the consistency of that three-point shooting, and now they go up against a a Marquette team that has been able to do a better job of being able to guard the three-point arc. 29.5% is what they're allowing opponents to shoot from three when they're at home. So this is a line that I did set at 12. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And with this total, I did set mine at a 152. Butler's playing a bit more up-tempo, but Marquette playing a bit better defense and a bit more slowly. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Marquette. 733, 734 on the betting board. It is Georgia, and UGA is finding themselves as a 2 to 2.5 point home favorite against Arkansas, with a total on this game anywhere between 152.5 and 153.5. Set this line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it. If you look at the metrics and the metrics alone, that would put me on Arkansas on the spot. I just can't get behind this Arkansas team right now. Arkansas is outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. I really like this roster, too. With his Arkansas team, Trayvon Brazile is 6'10". He's able to pop threes. He gives you 6+ rebounds per game. Chandler Lawson has been able to do a relatively solid job down low, but right now you're just getting a turd sandwich from this team. They're 183rd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. Georgia's 64th in the country, and Georgia comes in really riding some good momentum, and Georgia has actually been able to do a really nice job of cutting teams off from three-point range, allowing opponents to shoot just 29.3% from three-point range. Home and road numbers combined, they're in the top 60 in all of college basketball with that regard. And though this is a Georgia team that they don't necessarily do a beastly job with regards to their rebound rate or anything like that, they do a relatively solid job, as you've been able to have Russell Chaba be able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. For Arkansas, you do have Trayvon Mark along with Kayleigh Battle, who've been able to do a solid job being able to combine for in that neighborhood about 30 points per contest, both shooting north of 40% from three-point range. But ever since Keon Mennefield has come to the fold, this team has just not been able to do a whole heck of a lot defensively. They have given up 73+ points in each of their last 3 games. Mennefield had that big 34-point performance against UNC Wilmington, which you do like to see. But that said, now you're going up against a Georgia team that's really been batting down the hatches with regards to their defense. 68 points or fewer surrender, and now 3 out of their last 5 games. You got an Arkansas team that has been falling down the toilet bowl with that regard. They've been able to do a relatively solid job with their offense, but I do think that for Georgia, they're going to stay disciplined. They've got 2 guys in the backcourt, and Noah Thomason, Jabir Abdul-Rahim, who have done a nice job of being able to control the ball. Only about 11.5 turnovers for this team. They combine to shoot 40% from 3 and about 25.5 points per contest. And with just the current form of Arkansas, them being away from Bud Walton Arena, where they just lost miserably over the weekend, I do think that Georgia going to be able to get it done. I did set Georgia as a 3.5 point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the number. I did set my total 153.5. Seeing that 152.5 out there with the way that Arkansas is currently playing defense, I'm looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with UGA. 735, 736 on the betting board. It is Florida, and they are going to be on the road facing off against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is a 2 to 2.5 point home underdog. Totals between 157.5 and 158. Talked about this game with our good friend Blake Lovell, and I think that this is a good spot for Ole Miss. I set them as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be looking at them outright on the money line. It's a Florida team that they really just haven't impressed me too much. Florida continues to get to 80 on the regular, but they're shooting 33.5% from 3. They shoot 65% of the free throw line with 13.5 turnovers per game. The overall efficiency for Florida is not there. They're just scoring more points this year because they've cranked up their tempo. You've got Walter Clayton along with Zion Pullen. They're pulling in buckets. They've been able to get a combined about 30.5 points, right around 8 assists per contest. And Pullen, he's been able to give you 44% three-point shooting. And for Florida, one thing that this team is doing very well, rebounding. Alex Condon, Micah Handglot, along Tyree Samuel. These 2 guys are combining for about 22 rebounds per game. So it's going to be a very difficult thing for Ole Miss to match up with. But you got 7'5" giant of the earth, Jamarian Sharp, who's able to do a good job giving you multiple blocks. He, along with Musa Cisse, should be able to do a relatively solid job in this spot. It's an Ole Miss team that's only 255th in the country in terms of rebound rate. I fully expect that to improve going up against a Florida team that actually ranks 11th with this regard, but it is an Ole Miss team that has been one of the best teams in all of college basketball with their three-point shooting percentage, shooting north of 40% from 3. Do have to feel like there's going to be inevitable regression, because every player that is averaging north of 1 point per game that has made at least 1 3 for Ole Miss is shooting at least 38.6% from three-point range, led by Matthew Morrell and Alex Flanagan. Both guys are giving you between 16 and 16.5 points per game. It's just absolutely ridiculous what we have been seeing there. Jamin Brakefield has been able to give you 4+ rebounds per game. He's shipping in their double figures as well. And when you take a look at this Florida defense, they do have a little bit of a kryptonite, giving up three-pointers on the road. They're allowing opponents to shoot 40.9% from three-point range on the road. So that's going to be a little bit of an issue for Ole Miss. They're 75th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and I think that they're going to continue to tie it on this Florida team. Florida is playing very much up-tempo, now in the top 40 in terms of total possessions per game, but Ole Miss is a team that, under the tutelage of Chris Beard. They're looking to play tough defensive-oriented basketball, and I do think that they're going to be able to do so here. So I did set Ole Miss as a 1.5 point favorite. And I think that this is a little bit correlated. And over bodes better for Florida, and under bodes better for Ole Miss. And I do think that Ole Miss is going to do a good job. I'll be able to slow this game down a little bit more and just flat out executing. So I'm going to be taking a look at Ole Miss on the money line. Did set by total 151.5. So also looking at the under 737, 738 on the betting board. Boston College hits the road face off against Syracuse, and Syracuse is a favorite of 4 points. Your total on this game is 156, and with Syracuse, did set them as a favorite of 2 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Boston College. Boston College is going to have the best player in this game, and that's no disrespect to what Judah Mintz has been able to do, but Quentin Post is a 7-footer that's able to give you 18 points, 8 boards, shoots 46.5% from 3 with 3.5 assists and 2 blocks per contest. Perhaps in terms of pure scoring, Judah Mintz is a better player. He's able to give you 19 points, 3 boards, 4 assists. He's shooting about 35.5% from 3-point range, and also with Judah Mintz, he's been able to do a really good job, be able to generate some steals as well. This man has been able to give you north of 3 steals per contest in each out of the last 5 games, but also the turnovers have really cranked up for Judah Mintz as well. He's averaging north of 4.5 turnovers per game in the last 5 as well, and that's a bit of an issue. Go up against the Boston College team that, while they're not amazing at being able to generate turnovers, this team is pretty incredible at being able to bomb it from 3-point range. They do shoot 37% from the outside. Going up against the Syracuse team that it's been touch and go with the defense, you figured that that would be the case after moving on from the pack line defense that they had played for 100 billion years, but Syracuse is doing an okay job of locking down from 3-point range. They allow opponents to shoot 31.3% from 3-point range, and Boston College, their biggest issue is giving up the 3 ball. Opponents are shooting 38% from 3-point range against them in a roadside court environment. I do feel like a little bit of that is bad luck, and they're able to mitigate that a tad with Claudia Harris shooting about 45% from 3, 15.5 points per contest, and this is a Boston College team that I think is going to be able to do a solid job down low. You got Malik Brown for the Syracuse team, was able to give you about 8 points, 6 rebounds per game, and then J.J. Starlin's a little bit of a do-it-all player that hasn't shot it well from 3-point range, but has been able to give you 12 plus points per contest. He gives you 3 assists. He gives you like 4 to 5 rebounds per game. So really outside of 3-point shooting, he's been able to do a little bit of everything for the team. But Syracuse just 247th in the country in terms of overall rebound rate. You've got a Boston College team that's able to be so efficient because you do have Jaden Zachary, who was actually a really good 3-point shooter a season ago, turned into more of a point guard who's got an assist-to-turnover ratio of 3. And with Boston College in the top 135 in terms of rebound rate, being able to have McLaughlin down low, be able to give you about 6 boards per contest. Prince El-Jabi has been able to give you 4.5 boards as well. I do think the Boston College holds in there in this spot, in which I do think that you're going to see plenty of made shots, but at the same time, I do think the Boston College going to cool down a little bit with their 3-point shooting, and I do think that their 3-point shooting defense on the road going to be a little bit more improved as well, going up against the Syracuse team that they have not allowed 73 points or fewer in, I believe, 6 out of their last 7 games. So this is a spot where I'm going to be looking at the under and going to be able to take the points with BC, 739, 740 on the betting board. It is TCU playing up to Oklahoma. Oklahoma does find themselves as underdogs of between 4 to 4.5 points. So on this game is anywhere between 150.5 and 151. Going to set TCU as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Oklahoma. Both of these teams have very remarkable metrics. Both of these teams have not necessarily played against the world's greatest competition either, so you do have a few question marks there, but that said, this is a Oklahoma team that I really like the way that they've been able to improve that efficiency. The 13 turnovers per game is a little bit unsightly, but they do shoot as a collective about 36% from 3-point range. Owen away is currently shooting 68% from 3-point range. That is going to be going downward just a little bit, but I also do think that something that is going to be going northward is the rebounding. Rivaldo Soares has been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. I like what I've been seeing out of John Hughley, right around 9 points, 4.5 boards, and it's turned into well north of a 40% 3-point shooter. So his versatility has been very key for an Oklahoma team in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts down low, as this is a team that's actually 16th in the country with regards to rebound rate. Now, if you take a look at TCU, this team is in the top 50 in terms of both offensive and defensive efficiency. They check really out of the boxes. They are 19th in the country in terms of overall rebound rate, even though they themselves don't have a single guy that gives you north of 6 rebounds per game in Emmanuel Miller. And I do think that these teams are really cut from a similar cloth. You've got a TCU team that they shoot about 33% from 3-point range. You've got a guy that's able to give you about 11.5 points, and Jacoby Coles, who's been from 3-point range, shooting about 38.5% from the outside. Jameer Nelson Jr., Micah Peavy have both been able to give you about 3.5 assists per contest, along with Avery Anderson III. And as a matter of fact, I have your top 5 scorers for TCU. 4 of them give you at least 2.7 assists per game, none of them north of 3.5, but I do think that Javion McCollum was able to give you about 14.5 points per game, shooting 38% from 3. It's going to be key, and And what else I think is key in this spot, Oklahoma has just played a little bit of better competition to this point rather than TCU. Oklahoma coming into their own defensively, giving up 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, for TCU, they're coming off of giving up 80 plus and now 3 out of their last 5 games. But I do think that TCU gets back to basics. This is a Jamie Dixon coach team, in which they always do pride themselves on defense. So did somebody total 145.5, diving in on the under with Oklahoma. Won't take anything north of 2 with them. 741, 742 on the betting board. It is Washington State. They're on the road. They're facing off against USC. And the Trojans do find themselves as favorites of anywhere between 5.5 to 6 points here total on this game. It is between 147 and 148. I do feel like USC should be the favorite. And I do think that they're going to bounce back a little bit, but I set this line at 5. So I'm going to be willing to take the points in this ordeal. It is a USC squad that has been able to get a little bit more out of Bronny James, but the guys that you really want to be identifying are Boogie Ellis along with Isaiah Collier, who have been able to combine for north of 30 points per contest. Ellis is shooting well north of 40% from 3-point range, and the offense has been just fine for this USC team. It's the defense that is just getting completely smoked. As for USC, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this team is 168th in all of college basketball, going up against a Washington State team that they've actually done a really good job defensively, but they've also got some very vast metrics with regards to home and road splits. As for Washington State, they rank about 67th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're giving up 8.4 points more per 100 possessions in a road/neutral current environment rather than at home. I do like what Andre Yagmovsky has been able to give this team, as he down low has been able to give you right around about 6 boards, 10.5 points at 6'8". He's able to let it fly from 3-point range. It is a Washington State team that on the glass, they're 24th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate as well. And for USC, for this team and all that they're able to do with regards to block shots, as Joshua Morgan is able to give you 2.5 blocks per contest. They're only 149th with regards to rebound rate. Vincent Iwuchukwu, only about 5 rebounds per game. That hasn't been great. And for Washington State, they do the little things. They only turn the ball over about 10.9 times per contest. Miles Rice, along with Isaac Jones, have been able to combine for about 29 points per contest. You've been able to get some relatively good outside shooting with about a 39% clip, 8 points, 4 boards out of Jalen Wells as well. So I like the way the Washington State has been performing. They're a little bit of a different team on the road, and they've been acting up a little bit more defensively. 74 plus points surrendered in 3 of their last 4 games, but for this USC team, they themselves have been all over the place with regards to their defense. They have given up 74 plus points in really each of their last 5 games, but I do think the Washington State, with their slow controlled style outside of the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, slows things down just a little bit. Some might total 145. I'm looking at the under, and when it comes to this USC team, going to make them a 5-point favorite, so going to be taking a look at the points. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit our extra game, 743, 744. Cal is going to be playing against Colorado. Colorado just find themselves as a 5.5 point road favorite. Totals between 150 and 150.5, with Colorado did set them as a favorite of 4.5 points. So at the 5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cal. Now with Cal, it's been a season to forget, to say the least. This team is currently outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That has been absolutely awful, but you do have a guy down low in Fardaws Aimaq who's able to give you a double-double, 17 plus points, 11 plus rebounds per game. He's able to shoot some threes as well. And it's a Cal team that's been able to do a solid job on the glass. A top 100 team with regards to rebound rate. It's a Colorado team that now they get back in the fold, Tristan De Silva, and that's big because you've got KJ Simpson, who's been Mr. Do-It-All, giving you like 20 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. And for this Colorado team, they've been one of the best 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. A team that's clocking in the top 20 with that regard. As a matter of fact, number 9, but the home and road splits, massive. 45.3% 3-point shooting team at home, 30.3% in a road/neutral court environment, and they themselves have been giving it up quite a bit from 3-point range as well. This is a Colorado bunch that, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they're 211th in all of college basketball, allowing opponents to shoot 38.2% from 3-point range. Jalen Tyson has been a top 40 scorer in all of college basketball. He's been able to give this Cal team right in the neighborhood about 18 plus points per contest. You've been able to get back in the fold guys like Jalen Celestine, Devin Askew. It's taken them a little bit of time to get going, but I do feel like the wheels are starting to turn finally for the team, and you're still dealing with a few injuries. You still have out of the fold someone like a Cody Williams, who knows when he's going to return, if he does at all. Giovanni Hadley has been able to do a relatively solid job shooting 42% from 3-point range, but Colorado just too inconsistent away from home for me to trust in them. And this is a Cal team that they themselves, I do think, is going to come into their own a little bit more defensively. 71 points of fear surrender in 3 of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Colorado team that has been held down to 74 points or fewer in each of their last 4. So did some my total 146.5, diving under, and I'm going to be willing to take 5 plus here with Cal. Now let's hit our extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra
games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502, it is Army, and they're going to be playing us with Loyola, Maryland. Loyola does find themselves as an underdog of 4.5 points, and your total on this game getting it at a 125 to a 125.5. Certainly, this Army team has been rough with regards to their offense. They are outside of the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Could not quite go that far with this total. I did set it at a 130 with Loyola, Maryland, also being a team that is well outside of the top 220 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, so I'm going to be looking at the over, and with this Army bunch, I did set them as a 6-point favorite. If I said Loyola Maryland was the favorite, it's actually Army who's a 4.5-point favorite, and with Loyola Maryland, I did set them as a 6-point underdog. With Loyola Maryland, they should be able to do an okay job down low with Golden DK, giving you about 7.5 rebounds per game, but Loyola Maryland just has butterfingers, as they've been turning the ball over 15 times per contest. They shoot 61.5% at the free throw line. Army loses darn near everything from that backcourt from a season ago, but they've been able to do a nice job of being able to mix and match. Josh Govins has been able to give you 13 points, 6 boards for an Army team that is finally shooting above 30% from three-point range, 31% from distance. Now, Army also shooting 57% at the free throw line. That is a mondo issue, but that said, this is a Army team that they've actually done an okay job with their defense. A top 130 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Loyola Maryland, they're getting cooked from the outside, allowing opponents to shoot about 34.9% from the outside in a road/neutral court environment. You've been able to have someone like D'Angelo Steins for this Loyola Maryland team be able to give you double figures. He shoots it okay from three-point range, but Loyola Maryland, 78-plus points allowed in each of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, you've got an Army team that they have allowed fewer than 60 points in each of their last 4 games. And for this Army team in regulation, because they played that game against Stony Brook in overtime, in regulation, they had only given up 61 points. So the last time they gave up north of 70 points in regulation, you have to go all the way back to November. I do think that we're going to get a little bit more scoring in this spot with the way the Loyola Maryland is playing defense. I did set my total 130 looking at the over, but with Army, want to lay up to 5.5 points with them. Set them as a 6-point favorite. 306-503, 306-504. Navy, it's a road face off against Holy Cross. Holy Cross is a 3 to a 3.5 point underdog with your total between 135.5 and 136. Set Navy as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Navy, another team outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but this Navy team is completely locking you down on defense. Navy, 61st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Holy Cross, not in the top 75 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are 351st. They've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to one of their main guards in Bo Montgomery, who was last year a double-figure scorer for the team. This year, averaging more in that neighborhood, about 10 or so points per contest, but that's been a little bit of an issue. So Joel Octave has to do a little bit of everything, 14.5 points, 6 boards, from three-point range. Has been able to fire it in there at a clip of about 32%. All in all, Holy Cross shooting about 33.5% from the outside, but as a team that ranks in the bottom 100 in terms of total possessions per game, them turning the ball over 12.5 times per contest and shooting 61.5% at the free throw line. It's ghastly. This Holy Cross team is getting decimated on the glass. We're 13th in the country with that regard, and it's not to say that this Navy team is necessarily the world's greatest team with regards to rebound rate, 252nd in the country, but they should be able to have Don Draper be able to really control things down low. Donovan Draper right around 9 rebounds per game. Austin Benigini has really been able to rise up as a top flight scorer for the team, being able to give you about 14 points per contest. And when it comes to this Holy Cross team, I mean, they've been wholly awful with regards to being able to guard the perimeter, as well as for the Crusaders in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, for 353rd in all of college basketball. Opponents shoot 38.8% from three-point range at home against them. For a Navy team that's been ice cold from three-point range, I think that's exactly what they need to get going, and I think the Navy continues to do a tremendous job defensively in a game involving 2 teams outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So somebody told 126.5. I'm looking at the under. My 126.5 on the spreadsheet, not a typo. I really think that this is a low-scoring slog. Of Navy, set them as a 6.5 point favorite. One to lay the number. 306-505, 306-506. Boston U is going to be playing against American. And American does find themselves in a pick'em game. Your total on this game is between 133 and 133.5. Set American as a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on this pick'em line. When it comes to American, they need to buff up with regards to their three-point shooting defense. Opponents are shooting 39.6% from three-point range against them when they are away from home. But this is also a Boston U team that, to my surprise, they've just been getting way overvalued in the market. I have no idea why. There's really nothing to like about this Boston U team. You've got one guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. That'd be Otto Landrum, who gives you 6 rebounds per game. Nobody averages north of 10 points per contest. They turn the ball over 12.5 times per game. They shoot 66% at the free throw line. I just don't see why people have been upgrading this Boston U team. Meanwhile, for American, while they they do have their issues on defense. They are well outside the top 300 with that regard. You've got Mark Rogers, a 6'9" combo player that shoots 38.5% from 3, 15 plus points per contest. Elijah Stevens gives you 5.3 assists per game. And last year, this American team, they were just so awful at being able to take care of the ball. They were in the bottom 20 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. That's down to about 11 turnovers per contest this season. And this is an American team that I think that they're going to be able to hold their own on glass. They're about 126th in the country with that regard. This is Boston U team that, to their credit, they're about 100th with that regard. But that said, you've had someone like your Greg Spruce be able to do a nice job shooting about 87.5% the free throw line, double-figure amount of points. He's able to give you a little bit defensively as well. You've been able to have Colin Smalls come up big in terms of helping this team facilitate as well. You've seen a little bit of a lesser role from a season ago, but that said, with this Boston U team, again, I just have no idea where this love for them has been coming through. As the defense has been just fine. They have given up 63 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. The offense, though, they have come up completely snake eyes with 63 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, and it's an American team that has gotten past 70 in 4 of their last 5. So I'm going to be willing to take American on this pick'em line, set by total on 132.5. I think that this is a low-scoring slog, so looking under and going to be willing to take American on this pick'em line. 306-507, 306-508. Queens NC plays us the Florida Gulf Coast, and Dunk City is in a pick'em game of their own. Total on this game is 151, and with Dunk City, I did set them as a 3-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take Queens. I know that we've had Nick Lawrenson, who's actually a part of this Queens bunch, and I know that he was mentioning just how different this Queens team is at home rather than on the road, and it really is true. This is a Queens team that certainly they've been getting cooked on defense in all locations. They are outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, just 283rd with regards to overall rebound rate. This is the Florida Gulf Coast team that they themselves have been really all over the place. They're a league average team with regards to rebound rate, about 163rd. You've been able to get some relatively good production out of Keyshawn Coleman, Zach Anderson. These two guys are combining for 24 points per game, and Anderson is shooting 48% from 3-point range. I like his overall game. He is not a 48% 3-point shooter. That is something that should be hitting the skids sooner rather than later. And for Dunk City, I was talking about Queens not defending. Dunk City, 326th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're relatively slow, so their numbers don't look as horrible metrically as Queens does, but Queens is actually the team that's doing a better job in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, especially when they are at home. And this is a Queens team that, while they don't necessarily have a superb amount of size down low, they do have AJ McKee, who's able to do a little bit of everything for the team. 4 boards, 1.7 steals, 16 points. It's a Queens team that they shoot about 34% from 3-point range, and now they get to go up against a Dunk City team that certainly has been having their issues with regards to guarding the 3-point arc, and I do think that that is going to be the big difference maker in this game. It is a Florida Gulf Coast team that's 352nd in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Not to say that Queens has been absolutely superb with this regard or anything like that, but Queens, they're clocking in 116th. So it's a spot where I did set Queens as a 3-point favorite. We'll take them on this pick'em line, and I did set my total at a 151 as well. We're going to be waiting on a little bit of movement. I was seeing a little bit earlier, more of a 151.5. If this goes to a 151.5, 152, I'm going to be looking at the under. Now with Queens, want to take them on this pick'em line. 306-509, 306-510. It is Fairleigh Dickinson. They play also Chicago State. Chicago State, an underdog of a point. Total on this game is 146.5. I set Chicago State as a 2-point favorite. Looking at them outright on the money line. This is a Chicago State team without a conference, so every single one of these games really matters for them. Meanwhile, these teams like Fairleigh Dickinson, it's more of a tune-up game for them, so I do think that the tenor of this is very interesting, and Chicago State has actually been able to do a relatively solid job defensively. They're a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, 88th in the country in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. As for Chicago State, they themselves do turn the ball over about 14 times per contest. They do not shoot it well from 3-point range. That has been a big giant issue for them, but a top 200 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against Fairleigh Dickinson team that, their nickname should be Hickory because they are getting smoked defensively. 325th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and stunningly enough, worse on defense at home rather than on the road. They are a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis when they're at home. That's not good to say the least, and the best player out there on the floor, in my opinion, does belong to Chicago State. As for Chicago State, they've got Wesley Carter, who's giving you 18 points, 5 boards. He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. I absolutely love his game. And then on the flip side, you've got a Fairleigh Dickinson team that, even though they don't have a ton of size, they've honestly been relatively okay down low. Ainsley Almoner, along Joel Emmanuel, throwing their Sean Moore. These 3 guys, they'd be able to combine between the 3 of them in that pocket about 20-plus rebounds per game. Almoner, 36.5% 3-point shooter, 16 points per contest for a Fairleigh Dickinson team that they play very, very up-tempo, so they are going to turn the ball over right around 13 times per contest. Not a whole heck of a lot of concern there, but for Fairleigh Dickinson, even though they play super duper fast, not like they're efficient. They're 271st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and I point out all the turnover issues that we've seen out of Chicago State. Chicago State is right on par with that. They're about 315th in the country with that regard. You're able to throw in there the fact that Fairleigh Dickinson is 319th in the country with regards to overall rebound rate, and for Chicago State, having Noble Crawford, Brent Davis be able to combine for a little bit over 4 steals per contest, and Crawford shoot 40% from 3, I think is going to be the X factor. So I did check Chicago State as a 2-point favorite, looking at them outright on the money line. I do think that Chicago State turns this into a little bit more of a defensive expose, but with the way the Fairleigh Dickinson gives up points, I think that this goes a little bit more up-tempo. Did set my total at 148, looking at the over and looking at Chicago State outright on the money line. 306-5-11, 306-5-12. It is Winthrop, and they hit the road face-off against Presbyterian, and Presbyterian does find themselves as a underdog of 6 points. Your total on this game is between 141 and 142.5, and with Presbyterian, I did set them as an underdog of 5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the 6. This is a Winthrop team that certainly has been able to do a tremendous job offensively, but they're just not getting as much rebound-wise as they did a season ago. Alex Zimmerman is really the lone guy on the roster that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game. You can never bank on this Winthrop team giving you a whole heck of a lot defensively, though it's been much better this year. They are about 147th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but giving up 16 more points per 100 possessions when they're in a roadside shoot record environment rather than at home. Presbyterian more around 227th in the country with regards to overall points allowed on a per possession basis. But the big concern here for Winthrop is that they are a little bit touch and go with regards to their 3-point shooting numbers, and I do think that that is going to be costing them, especially with them not generating as many second chances as they did a season ago. You've been able to have KJ Doucette be able to shoot nearly 40% from 3-point range. He's been able to give this team 14 plus points per contest, so I do like his overall game. But for Presbyterian, you've been able to get quite a bit out of Marquise Barrett. Barrett has been able to come in and he's been able to give this team right around about 14 points, 2 steals per contest. Samaje Teal is going to be probably the best 3-point shooter in this game, shooting 43.5% from distance, 11 points per contest. It is a Winthrop team that they've also got Kason Harrison. We've seen a dip in his 3-point shooting, but has done a nice job doling out the ball. 4 assists and 2 turnovers per game. He, along with Kelton Telford, have been able to combine for about 23.5 points per game. And for Telford, last season, he was averaging 8 plus rebounds per game. That's down to about 4.5 thus far this season. For a Winthrop team that they do shoot about 34% from 3-point range, but they also do turn the ball over right in that neighborhood about 13 times per game as well. It's a Presbyterian team that has been able to do a pretty solid job defensively, giving up 67 points of fear to their last 3 games. Meanwhile, for Winthrop, it's been a team that's really been all over the place. To their credit, 72 points of fear surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games, with the offense has hit a little bit of a rut as well. If you take a look at regulation and regulation only, because they have played some overtime, 71 points for fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So very interesting spot to be. Did set Winthrop as a 5-point favorite, so willing to take the 6 with Presbyterian. And with regards to this total, I did set mine at a 143. I do think that Winthrop going to be able to bust through a little bit more with their offense, and Presbyterian, they themselves have been cranking things up just a little bit with them being able to get to at least 68 points in each of their last 4 games. So looking at the over and the points with Presbyterian, 306-5-13, 306-5-14. UNC Asheville, it's road face-off against High Point. High Point hopes to not be a low point as they find themselves as 8.5-point favorites. Their total is between 154.5 and 155, and with UNC Asheville, I did set them as an underdog of 9 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with High Point, a team that ranks in the top 25 nationally in terms of points scored on a per possession basis with really good overall balance. They only turn the ball over 11 times per contest while cranking it up tempo a little bit, and you've got multiple ball handlers as Kezagifa is able to give 13 points, 3 assists per contest, and then Duke Miles, top scorer, gives you 4 assists, 19 points per contest. Both of these guys shoot north of 35.5% from 3-point range. High Point doesn't beat themselves as they shoot about 76.5% at the free throw line. And then you've got Jocelyn Bodu, who's been able to do a good job in tandem with Kamani Hamilton down low with a combined about 15.7 rebounds per game, and that should be able to neutralize the fact that you've got the biggest unicorn in this game in Drew Pember. Pember stands right around 6'10", 6'11", 19.5 points, 7.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's able to shoot 33% from 3 for a UNC Asheville team that does a superb job shooting 36.5% from the outside, but I do think that this High Point team is going to be able to hold up. High Point, they themselves do allow quite a few threes, as they're 319th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but that falls to about 34.4% at home, north of 38% on the road. And for this Asheville team, they've actually done a really good job of being able to guard the 3-point arc. Where they really get destroyed is on those 2-point shots, as you do have Nate McMillan, who's still been able to give you right around about 6 rebounds per game, but this is an Asheville team that you do have your concerns with them, just being able to match up with a High Point team that has been able to do a nice job of being able to generate second and third third chances, and High Point, number 3 in all of college basketball in terms of overall rebound rate for Asheville. Despite the fact that they've got Drew Pember, they're only about 179th with this regard, even though they've been able to do a nice job of being able to guard the arc as well. It is a UNC Asheville team that they just don't compare defensively as well in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis because of all the open twos that they're giving up. Asheville, 284th in all of college basketball. They also don't force steals. Meanwhile, they're bottom half of all of college basketball team in terms of turning the ball over. Meanwhile, it's a High Point team, more on 233rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is an ordeal where I did set my total at 155. I do think that both of these teams going to be able to sink quite a few shots. So looking at the over, and with High Point, going to be willing to lay up to 8.5 with them. 36-5-15, 36-5-16. It is Lafayette on the road facing off against Colgate, and Colgate does find themselves as a 13.5 point favorite. Totals between 129.5 and 130. And with Colgate, I did set them as a favorite of 13.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. This is a Lafayette bunch that has just been deplorable with regards to their offense. They're not quite Mississippi Valley State level bad, but in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 359th in all of college basketball. You don't have a single guy for this Lafayette team that's averaging north of 10.5 points per contest. Meanwhile, for Colgate, not quite the same three-point shooting team that they have in the past years. They've been a top 5 three-point shooting team each of the last 3 campaigns, but that's at still shooting 36% from three-point range, with Braden Smith being a do-it-all player, 14 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, 1.8 steals per contest. So do have to like what he's supplying for this team. Meanwhile, you've got a Lafayette team that they just aren't necessarily finding their footing as well with regards to their defense, as they are well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going to my theory of just because you play slow doesn't mean that you necessarily play tremendously on defense. And for Lafayette, 282nd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, allowing opponents to shoot darn near 37% from 3 in a road/shoot court environment, with Keegan Records doing a relatively solid job down low for this Colgate team as well, giving you about 7 rebounds per game. And for Lafayette, you also don't have a single guy in the team that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. You're hoping to be able to get a little bit more out of Justin Vanderbond, 7-footer from Boston College, who's only been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. Each of their top 4 rebounders actually do give you 4+ rebounds per game, and Eric Sonnenberg leads the way with 9.5 points per game. But this Lafayette team, they turn the ball over 13 times per contest. They shoot 68.5% at the free throw line, 28.5% from three-point range, going up against the Colgate team that all of a sudden has been able to really find their offense, 78 and 80 points in their first 2 games in conference play. Colgate played a really loaded non-conference slate, so that has prepared them very well. And for this Lafayette team, this team has not exceeded the 60-point plateau in any of their last 5 games. It is a Lafayette team that I believe that they have gotten past 70 in 3 games thus far this season, but it feels like a distant memory. So I did set my total at a 127.5. I'm going to be looking at the under. Now with Colgate, I did set them as a favorite more around 13.5 points. If we can get back to a 13, I'm going to be willing to lay that number. If we get to 14 plus, I just think that there's too few possessions for Colgate to be able to cover. So 13 or less, willing to lay with Colgate. 14 or more, looking at Lafayette and looking at the under. 3-6-5-17, 3-6-5-18. Gardner-Webb going to be playing against Charleston Southern. Charleston Southern is a 12 to a 12.5 point underdog. Your total is between 140.5 at 141. I did set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Gardner-Webb. This is just not the same team defensively that they have in the past years. Now, it's not like this Charleston Southern team is necessarily doing a tremendous job on defense either. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this team is right around 353rd. But for Gardner-Webb, typically this is a team that's like a top 75 team defensively, and then they do nothing on offense. Gardner-Webb, 245th nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, giving up a full point more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road. And for Charleston Southern, I think that they should be able to do an okay job on the glass. You got Tajay Kelly along with RJ Tuard, who have been able to combine for about 14 rebounds per game. RJ Johnson shoots 40% from 3 along with Tajay Kelly. Both of these guys shoot 40+% from 3. Johnson has been able to give you 16 points per contest. It's a Charleston Southern team that, for all the woes that they have defensively in a road/shoot court environment, they do allow opponents to shoot only about 33.5% from three-point range. Not saying it's amazing, but you know what? That'll fly against a Gardner-Webb team that they themselves have been allowing opponents to shoot 35% from three-point range in their home games. It is a Gardner-Webb team that, without Lufio Lufio along with Kareem Reed, they just don't have as much down low. They were their main shot blockers from a season ago, and Gardner-Webb has slipped to 279th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Now, with this Gardner-Webb team, you do have a little bit in the backcourt to be able to help you out. DQ Nicholas is able to give you a few assists. He's been able to chip in there in that neighborhood about 10 points per contest. You've been able to have Julian Sawarmo be able to chip in there 13 points. Okay, 3-point shooter, but it's not like the Gardner-Webb team has been able to elevate with their offense, shooting 65.5% from the free throw line, 31.5% from three-point range. They take relatively good care of the ball, but other than Nicholas, along with Julian Swarmo, you're able to throw in there the 13 points per game of Caleb Robinson. Nobody else giving you north of 6.7 points per game. So I do think that Charleston Southern going to be able to hold in there. Want to take the points with them, set them as a 9-point dog, and did set my total at a 141. Both of these teams have been acting up on defense, so at the 140.5, looking at the over, and going to be able to take the points with Charleston Southern. 306, 519, 306, 520. Kennesaw State, we give our O to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. They play us to Stetson, and Stetson is an underdog of 2.5 points. Total on games between 161.5 and 162. Even though Stetson is a bottom 50 team in terms of total possessions per game, I did set my total at 164.5, looking at the over, because while Stetson plays slowly, you've got a Kennesaw State team that is right there at the top of all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. As a matter of fact, they are number one in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and both of these teams, they're really looking to shoot from three-point range. Kennesaw State, go of our O to Lane Kiffin, go Owls. They've been off with their three-point shooting only about 32.5% from distance, but feels like it's starting to come alive. And for Stetson, this has been, over the last 2 years, a top 50 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage if you combine last year and this year. And if you take a look at their three-point shooting defense, a bottom 50 team with that respect as well. So you got really both sides of it with the Stetson team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The Stetson team has been getting just completely cooked on defense. 345th in all of college basketball. For Stetson, you do have down low Aben Gusterse, who's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, but I do think that Devin Robinson and his 7.5 rebounds per game is going to be able to match up there. You've got a Kennesaw State team that has had Simeon Kodal be able to give you in that neighborhood about 3 assists, 16.5 points per game, and you've also got two really good facilitators on both sides. Both of these guys give you north of 6 assists per game. Stephon Swenson, 6 assists for Stetson. Tyrell Burton, about 6.3 assists per contest, and then Jalen Blackman. I mean, talk about a guy that is absolutely stuffing the stat sheet. 22 points per contest, shooting north of 45% from three-point range, but I do think that we're going to see a little bit of inevitable regression there. This is a Stetson team that, despite the fact that they've got one or two solid rebounders, they're just 293rd in all of college basketball regards to rebound rate. Not like Kennesaw State is too amazing themselves at 294th, but I do think that Kennesaw State does enough on the glass at home to be able to get it done. I do think that Stetson going to have a little bit of a tougher time shooting on the road. So I did set my total at 164.5, looking at the over, and with Stetson, made them a 6.5 point underdog, so one to lay with Kennesaw State. Go Owls, and we wrap things up with 306, 521, 306, 522. Bucknell is going to be on the road facing off against Lehigh. Lehigh does find themselves as a 7.5 to an 8-point favorite. And your total on this game is 139. Did set my total at 140.5. You've got a Lehigh team that ranks in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game, and though Bucknell has actually been a bottom 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, I do think that they are going to give up enough points to be able to push this total over, so I'm going to be looking at the over, as this is a Bucknell team that has not been too efficient on defense, who are in 88th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I'm going to be willing to take the points with them, as Lehigh, they themselves 232nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Bucknell, you haven't been able to get a ton of rebounding for this team. You've really got two guys that will be able to supply you with north of 3.5 rebounds per game, but you've got Noah Williamson, who is a true 7-footer, who is able to give you about 5 boards, and then Jack Forrest, all sorts of versatility, shooting 88% free throw line, 38.7% from 3, 5.5 boards, 15.5 points per game, going up against a Lehigh team that has Tyler Whitney Sidney along with Keith Higgins being able to combine for about 30 points, 35% three-point shooting, but Lehigh as a whole, they only shoot about 31.4% from three-point range. It is a Lehigh team that they really don't do a great job of being able to take care of the ball as well. About 12.7 turnovers per game. It is a Lehigh team that's 305th in the country in terms of overall rebound rate. So though Bucknell has their woes there, they're actually a little bit of a better rebound rate team. This is a Bucknell team that certainly is not going to be able to do an amazing job of being able to force turnovers in this spot. So that should allow Lehigh to be able to operate quite freely, and that'll be able to help out with this total over, as Bucknell 271st in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But with Lehigh having a really tough time being able to guard the three-point arc and having a 35% three-point shooter, and Josh Basco has been able to give you 9.5 points per contest, I do think that it is going to be able to help out this Bucknell team that they themselves have been able to have some better results recently. They were able to have that nice big win over Penn State on the road. That's something that's going to be able to get this team going. I do think that they're starting to find a little bit more outside of Alvin Edmonds, who's been dealing with injury all season long. And for Bucknell, credit where credit is due, they have actually given up 71 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Lehigh team that they have been certainly scoring their points to say the least, and they've been giving up as well, giving up 75-plus points in 3 of their last 4 games against Division I competition, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. Anything north of 7 going to be willing to take the points with the Buck now, and did set my total at a 140.5, so also looking at the over, and that will wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters AM, name does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And big thanks once again to our good friend Blake Lovell over there at Southeastern 14, coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.